In the beginning, there was only the void and the Father who dwelled within it. From nothingness, he crafted the first dimensions, separate realms suspended in perfect equilibrium. Urdak, the holy realm of order. Earth, the cradle of mortal potential, and the nameless dark realm that would one day be called Hell. Each dimension existed with its own physical laws, its own purpose in the great design. None were meant to touch. None were meant to breach the sacred barriers between them. The Father first turned his attention to Urdak, creating the Makers as his primary children, beings of pure energy, thought, and purpose. These luminous entities were extensions of his divine will, designed to maintain cosmic order while he contemplated the greater mysteries of existence. At their center, he placed the Khan Maker, first among equals, whose consciousness would guide her siblings in celestial harmony. The Khan's form was majestic and terrible, a being of golden light with 6 wings that could envelop worlds, crowned with a halo that channeled the Father's wisdom directly into her mind. Beneath the Khan came the Seraphim, the ruling council of Urdak, and below them, the countless lesser makers who maintained the architecture of paradise. The Father gifted them with the divine science's knowledge, transcending mortal comprehension, that allowed them to manipulate energy, matter, and consciousness itself. With these gifts, the Makers constructed Urdak into a realm of mathematical perfection, floating sanctums of pearl and gold suspended in an endless sky, where every angle and curve served a cosmic purpose. This was the first age, when the Makers knew neither death nor pain. The Father's next creation was the Luminarium, a vast machine that would maintain the cycle of Maker existence. When a Khan reached the end of her reign, she would undergo the sacred transfiguration, returning to the cosmic essence, while the Luminarium would select and elevate a new Khan from among the Seraphim. This cycle ensured that wisdom accumulated, while power remained in balance. The Makers, for all their glory, were bound by this system of divine succession, a reminder that even they served a greater design. As the Makers built their celestial civilization, they discovered something unexpected in the metaphysical foundations of reality, currents of energy flowing between dimensions, raw power that existed in the spaces between realms. This energy was unlike anything in their understanding, both creation and destruction, bound in a single force. The Makers named it Argent Energy, for its radiant crimson glow that burned brighter than any star in the heavens. Argent Energy defied the Father's perfect categorization. It was neither wholly of Urdak nor of any other realm. It existed as a bridge between worlds, a cosmic anomaly that the Father had either overlooked or deliberately left unexplained. The Makers, ever dutiful, began to study this energy, believing it might be the key to understanding the Father's greater design. They constructed vast machines to channel and purify Argent, converting it into a form that could power their divine technology without corrupting their perfect realm. While the Makers built their paradise in Urdak, the Father's attention turned to another dimension, one inhabited by mortal beings of flesh and spirit. This was Argent Danur, a harsh world of mountains and plains where a race of humans struggled against the elements. These mortals were warriors born, forging civilization from the unforgiving landscape through blood and iron. The Father watched their struggles with curiosity, seeing in them a reflection of creation's raw potential that the perfect Makers lacked the capacity to evolve through suffering. The Khan Maker, sensing the Father's interest in these lesser beings, proposed an experiment. The Makers would reveal themselves to the people of Argent Danur not as equals, but as gods. They would guide these mortals' development, elevate their civilization, and in return harvest their adoration. The Father permitted this intervention, curious to see how divine guidance would shape mortal potential. The day the Makers first descended upon Argent Danur became the cornerstone of Argenta mythology. Golden beings of light appeared in the sky above the largest settlement, their radiance outshining the sun. The Argenta fell to their knees before these celestial visitors, their primitive weapons useless against such power. But the Makers came not to conquer, but to elevate. They spoke directly into the minds of the Argenta, promising knowledge, protection, and purpose in exchange for faith. Thus began the covenant between Urdak and Argent Danur. The Makers shared carefully measured portions of their knowledge, architecture, metallurgy, language, mathematics, transforming a tribal society into an advanced civilization within generations. The Argenta built a vast empire under Maker guidance, with monuments and temples that reached toward the sky in geometric precision, mirroring Urdak's perfect forms. At the center of their capital city stood the Great Temple, a massive pyramid of white stone crowned with a perpetual flame that marked the sacred gateway where Makers would descend to deliver their divine edicts. The Argenta worshipped the Makers with absolute devotion, their entire society restructured around this cosmic faith. The highest honor for any Argenta was to be chosen as a vessel for Maker communication, their minds temporarily merged with celestial consciousness to receive divine inspiration. These vessels rarely survived the experience intact, their mortal minds unable to contain such vast awareness, but their sacrifice was celebrated as the ultimate devotion. From the strongest Argenta warriors, the Makers established the Order of the Night Sentinels, an elite brotherhood sworn to protect the sacred sites where Urdak and Argent D'Nur connected. These warriors underwent rigorous physical and spiritual trials, their bodies enhanced through sacred rituals that the Makers claimed purified their essence. The truth that these enhancements were early experiments with Argent energy remained hidden from the Sentinels themselves. They became living weapons forged in the name of a faith that was, in many ways, a carefully constructed system of control. The Night Sentinels wore armor of crimson and brass, emblazoned with the seal of their order, a sword piercing a crown, symbolizing strength in service to higher authority. Their weapons were blessed by Maker priests, infused with energies that could pierce dimensional barriers. The Sentinels believed these blessings came directly from the divine realm, unaware that the Makers were slowly introducing Argent energy into Argenta civilization through these sacred implements. While Urdak guided Argent D'Nur toward glory, the third primordial dimension festered in darkness. This realm had no name in the beginning, for naming gives purpose, and the Father had created this dimension as a counterbalance, a necessary void to offset the perfect order of Urdak. Here, in the shadows beyond creation's light, something stirred. The dimension began to develop its own consciousness, shaped not by divine will but by cosmic necessity. Order requires chaos, creation requires destruction, and the perfect balance of the Father's design demanded this dark reflection. The nameless realm began to feed on negative energy, pain, rage, despair, drawing these forces across dimensional boundaries, like a spiritual gravity. As consciousness formed within this dark dimension, it developed an insatiable hunger for more. The first entities to coalesce in this realm were not created but formed manifestations of primal fear and suffering given physical shape. These would later be called demons by mortal tongues, though such a simple term failed to capture their true nature as cosmic counterweights to the Maker's divine order. The most powerful consciousness to emerge from this chaotic realm was an entity that mirrored the Father himself, a dark reflection that would eventually be known as the Dark Lord. Where the Father created through divine inspiration, this entity created through corruption and absorption. Where the Makers were beings of pure energy and purpose, the Dark Lord's servants were amalgamations of flesh, spirit, and cosmic malice designed not for harmony, but for conquest. For millennia, these three dimensions, Urdak, Argent D'Nur, and the nameless Dark Realm, existed in fragile equilibrium. The barriers between them held firm, allowing each to develop according to its nature without interference from the others. The Makers continued to guide the Argenta toward greatness, while experimenting with Argent energy in secret. The Dark Realm continued to grow in power and malevolence, still contained within its boundaries, but pressing against them with increasing force. As generations passed, the Argenta Empire expanded across their world. They built cities of stone and metal that housed millions, established systems of governance and education that integrated Maker theology into every aspect of life. The Night Sentinels grew into a vast military order with divisions and specializations, though their elite core remained small. Only the most exceptional warriors admitted to their highest ranks. The Argenta developed technologies that approached the divine, though the Makers carefully restricted certain knowledge, ensuring their worshippers remained dependent on celestial guidance. In Urdak, a concerning development emerged. The Khan Maker, who had ruled since the dawn of creation, approached her transfiguration, the end of her celestial reign, when she would return to the cosmic essence. The luminarium, which had selected and elevated every Khan before, began to show signs of instability. The father, who had once directly communicated with the Makers, had grown increasingly distant, his voice becoming fainter in the collective consciousness of Urdak. The Seraphim Council debated what this meant. Was it a test of their autonomy, or a sign of divine displeasure? As the time for transfiguration approached, the Khan Maker made a fateful decision. She ordered the construction of a new facility deep within Urdak's foundation, the Argent processors. These massive machines would refine the dimensional energy they had discovered, purifying it for direct consumption by Maker consciousness. If the father would no longer sustain them directly, they would adapt and find new sources of power. This decision, born from necessity rather than malice, would be the first step on a path that would eventually shatter the boundaries between dimensions. The Maker's experiments with Argent energy yielded remarkable results. Properly refined, this energy could extend a Maker's existence, forestalling the need for transfiguration. The Khan, facing her own mortality for the first time, directed more resources toward Argent research, believing it might be the salvation of her kind. The Seraphim complied, though some harbored doubts about tampering with forces that existed outside the father's explicit design. On Argent Denur, the effects of these experiments manifested in subtle ways. The sacred sites where Makers and mortals communed began to exhibit strange properties, fluctuations in reality, unexplained phenomena, visions that drove some worshippers to madness. The priests of the Order Deeg, the highest religious authorities among the Argenta, reported these occurrences to their Maker overlords, but were told that these were simply manifestations of divine power too complex for mortal understanding. The truth was far more troubling. The Maker's experiments with Argent energy were creating microfractures in the dimensional barrier's hairline cracks in the walls that separated ordered reality from the chaotic realm beyond. Each fracture was tiny, easily sealed by Maker technology, but they were growing more frequent and more severe. In the nameless dark realm, the entities that dwelled there began to sense these weaknesses, pressing against them, like predators testing a fence for vulnerabilities. The Khan Maker, now sustaining her existence through regular infusions of refined Argent energy, ordered the creation of a new class of Maker, the Essence Harvesters. These specialized beings would identify and extract the purest sources of Argent from the spaces between dimensions. Their work was dangerous, bringing them perilously close to the barriers that separated the nameless dark realm from the rest of creation. The Khan justified this risk as necessary for the continued functioning of Urdak, and, by extension, the Cosmic Order. On Argent Denur, the Night Sentinels continued their sacred duty of protecting the Argenta civilization, unaware of the cosmic forces now in motion. Their Maker-guided society reached its zenith, a perfect theocracy where science and faith merged seamlessly, where every citizen from the highest noble to the lowest laborer lived in service to divine will. The great steppe around the capital became home to massive tournaments where Sentinel warriors demonstrated their skills, competing for the honor of joining the elite ranks that served directly under Maker command. One such tournament produced a champion of unparalleled skill, a warrior whose name would later be struck from Argenta records, but whose deeds would reshape the cosmos. This warrior rose through the Sentinel ranks with unprecedented speed, displaying a tactical brilliance and combat prowess that seemed almost supernatural. The Makers took special interest in this Sentinel, sensing something unique in his essence, a quality that resonated with the fundamental forces of reality in ways they had never observed in a mortal being. As this warrior ascended to the highest echelons of the Night Sentinels, becoming one of the elite commanders who communed directly with the Makers, changes were occurring in the heart of Urdak that would soon cascade throughout creation. The Khan Maker, increasingly dependent on Argent energy, authorized more aggressive harvesting methods. The Essence Harvesters began to probe deeper into the dimensional boundaries, extracting energy from regions perilously close to the Dark Realm's sphere of influence. It was during one such extraction that the first true breach occurred, momentary but catastrophic. An Essence Harvester, pushing beyond established safety protocols, punctured the barrier between dimensions. The breach lasted only seconds before Maker containment systems sealed it, but in that brief moment, something crossed over, not a physical entity but a consciousness, a sliver of the dark realm's malevolent awareness that infiltrated the harvested energy. This consciousness hid within the Argent stream, undetected by Maker filtration systems. When the energy was processed and distributed throughout Urdak's networks, this foreign awareness spread with it a corruption so subtle that even the Makers, with their divine perception, failed to notice its presence. It whispered directly into the Khan Maker's mind during her next Argent infusion, planting seeds of fear, ambition, and self-preservation that would gradually alter her decisions in ways imperceptible even to herself. On Argent Denur, the effects of this corruption manifested in the religious hierarchy. The priests of the Order Deeg, who served as intermediaries between the Makers and the Argenta population, began experiencing disturbing visions, glimpses of a realm beyond Urdak, a place of limitless power that promised even greater heights for their civilization. These visions came during their communion with the Makers, making the priests believe they were receiving new divine revelations, rather than corrupted impulses from an alien consciousness. The elite Sentinel Commander, now named a Sentinel Prime, reported strange phenomena at the boundaries of Argenta, territory disturbances in reality that defied explanation, wildlife driven to sudden madness, inexplicable disasters that left geometric patterns of destruction across the landscape. The Khan Maker dismissed these reports as natural fluctuations in the cosmic order, assuring the Sentinels that Urdak's oversight remained absolute. This dismissal marked the first deliberate deception between the Makers and their most devoted servants. In the deepest chamber of the Argent processors, Maker scientists made a discovery that should have been immediately reported to the Seraphim Council. The refinement process was no longer merely extracting energy from between dimensions, but actively drawing it from the nameless dark realm itself. The purest, most potent Argent energy came from the boundary where order met chaos, where divine creation brushed against uncreated void. This discovery was brought directly to the Khan Maker, who ordered it classified at the highest level. The implications were too significant to share the Makers. Beings of perfect order were now sustaining themselves with energy tainted by primordial chaos. The Khan rationalized this compromise as temporary necessary until the Father returned his full attention to Urdak, until the Luminarium could be restored to proper function. But as her dependence on Argent energy grew, so too did her willingness to take greater risks to secure its supply. She authorized the construction of specialized facilities at key points in Urdak, where the dimensional barrier was thinnest, ostensibly research stations, but in reality, extraction points designed to harvest energy directly from the edges of the Dark Realm. On Argent Denur, the Makers introduced new religious practices, rituals that channeled the collective spiritual energy of Argenta worshippers through the temples and back to Urdak. The priests told the population that their devotion now directly strengthened the gods, a great honor that brought mortals closer to divinity. In truth, these rituals created energy conduits that the Makers used to stabilize the increasing instability in dimensional boundaries caused by their harvesting operations. The Night Sentinels, still loyal beyond question, embraced these new practices with fervor. Their elite warriors underwent more intensive blessings procedures that infused their bodies with minute quantities of processed Argent energy, enhancing their strength, speed, and endurance beyond mortal limits. These enhancements were presented as divine gifts, rewards for unwavering faith, while serving as experimental data for the Makers' ongoing research into the effects of Argent on living tissue. The Sentinel Prime, recognized now as the greatest warrior in Argenta history, underwent the most extensive of these enhancements. His body accepted the Argent infusions at levels that would have killed any other mortal, suggesting something fundamentally different in his biological or spiritual makeup. The Makers studied him closely, recognizing a potential that extended beyond mere combat prowess. This warrior possessed qualities that resonated with cosmic forces in ways that might prove crucial to their plans. As the First Age drew to a close, 3 civilizations stood on the brink of a convergence that would forever alter reality itself. In Urdak, the Makers had compromised their divine purpose in the name of survival, drawing power from sources the Father had never intended them to touch. On Argent Denur, the Argenta civilization had reached its apex, a society of warrior faithful whose entire existence served the will of celestial beings who no longer deserved their devotion. And in the nameless dark realm, entities of cosmic malevolence pressed against weakening dimensional barriers, sensing the opportunities created by Maker desperation. The Father, from his place beyond comprehension, watched as his perfect design began to unravel. The great separation, the divine mandate that each dimension remained distinct, was eroding. The balance between order and chaos, creation and destruction, divinity and mortality was shifting toward a new configuration. Whether this was always his intention, or the result of creation exceeding its boundaries, remained a mystery even to the Makers who claimed to speak in his name. On the eve of what would later be called the Second Age, the Khan Maker gathered her Seraphim Council and the highest priests of Argent Denur for a sacred convocation. She spoke of a new covenant, a deeper partnership between Urdak and the Argenta, that would elevate both civilizations to unprecedented glory. What she did not reveal was the price of this elevation, a bargain already in motion with forces that existed beyond the light of creation, entities that promised unlimited Argent energy in exchange for something only mortals could provide. The dimensional barriers held firm for now, the nameless dark realm still separated from ordered reality by barriers of divine construction. But beneath the golden spires of Urdak and the sacred temples of Argent Denur, the foundations of cosmic order were shifting. The gates remained closed, but the keys to their opening were being forged in the very civilizations sworn to keep them sealed for eternity. The Second Age dawned with a flawed divinity. The Khan Maker stood before the luminarium, the sacred machine of succession, and witnessed its light dim for the first time since creation. The Father's voice, once clear as celestial harmony in the collective consciousness of Urdak, had faded to a whisper. Divine transfiguration, the sacred cycle that had sustained Maker civilization since its inception, now faltered at the moment of greatest need. The Khan's eternal form had begun to degrade, golden light fracturing at her edges, revealing the cosmic mortality that not even gods could escape forever. In the throne chamber of Urdak, the Seraphim Council gathered in unprecedented assembly. Their perfect forms arranged in geometric precision around their leader, they confronted a truth no Maker had ever faced: the potential end of their civilization. Without transfiguration, without the Father's direct sustenance, their immortality was revealed as conditional rather than absolute. The Khan Maker, her voice resonating through multiple dimensions simultaneously, declared what would become the foundational heresy of the New Age. If the Father withdraws his hand, we must sustain ourselves. Sama Maker, chief among the Seraphim, proposed increasing the harvesting of Argent energy, the dimensional power source they had discovered in the previous age. What began as experimental extraction would become industrial production, drawing more energy from the boundaries between realms. The Council approved this measure without recognizing it for what it truly was: the first deliberate step toward dimensional violation, the breaking of the Father's primary commandment that the realms remain separate. The Argent processors, once modest research facilities, were expanded into vast cathedral machines that dominated Urdak's foundation layer. These structures pierced deeper into dimensional boundaries, harvesting the crimson energy that flowed between ordered creation and the nameless dark realm beyond. Each extraction created minute fractures, in reality, hairline cracks in the walls between worlds, too small to detect individually, but multiplying with each harvest cycle. It was during the 300th extraction cycle that the Makers first encountered direct evidence of the Dark Realm's consciousness. An essence harvester, extending sensors beyond established safety parameters, recorded patterns in the Argent flow, rhythmic pulses that could not be explained by natural dimensional phenomena. These patterns, when analyzed by Maker scientists, revealed properties consistent with sentient communication. The nameless Dark Realm was not merely a chaotic counterbalance to Urdak's order, it harbored entities with purpose and intelligence. The Khan Maker, against the counsel of her Seraphim, authorized a controlled experiment, a direct sensory probe into the Dark Realm itself. The resulting data stream overwhelmed Urdak's analytical systems, but fragments resolved into comprehensible form. Among the chaos and cosmic horror were concepts the Makers recognized: offers of alliance, promises of power, and most seductively, methods for refining Argent energy to levels of potency that could sustain Maker existence indefinitely. The visions also revealed the nature of the Dark Realm, a dimension shaped by the cosmic principle of consumption, where souls and suffering were currency, where physical laws bent toward eternal torment rather than eternal harmony. The Makers named this realm for the first time, categorizing it in their celestial taxonomy as Hell, a classification borrowed from Argenta mythology, signifying a place of ultimate separation from divine grace. The Khan Maker, her form now visibly deteriorating without regular Argent infusions, made the decision that would bind Urdak to Hell in unholy symbiosis. She established direct communication with the primary consciousness of the Dark Realm, the entity that mirrored the Father in Hell as she mirrored him in Urdak. This being, which would later be known as the Dark Lord, offered a covenant of mutual benefit. Hell would provide unlimited Argent energy, and in exchange, Urdak would eventually provide something only the Makers could access mortal souls. This pact was the ultimate corruption of Urdak's purpose. The Makers, created to maintain cosmic order, had compromised with the very forces they were designed to counterbalance. The Khan justified this bargain as temporary necessity, a means of sustaining Urdak until the father returned his attention to his first children. But with each cycle of Argent consumption, the Makers' dependency grew, and their ability to break this unholy alliance diminished. On Argent Denur, the effects of this cosmic compromise manifested through the Order Deeg, the highest priests who communed directly with the Makers. During sacred rituals, these priests began receiving new revelations. Knowledge, the Makers claimed, came from deeper understanding of the Father's will, but actually originated in Hell's whispers through corrupted Argent channels. The Deeg priests, their minds altered by exposure to these influences, became the first mortal servants of Hell's agenda, though they perceived their actions as divine mandate. Under Deeg guidance, the Argenta civilization was subtly redirected. The Night Sentinels, still absolute in their loyalty to the Makers, were tasked with constructing new temples at specific locations across Argent Denur sites, where dimensional boundaries were naturally thinner. These temples featured architecture previously unknown in Argenta, design angular geometries that created strange acoustic properties, ritual chambers that focused the collective mental energy of worshippers into directional beams. The Sentinels were told these structures would strengthen the connection between mortals and gods, but their true purpose was to create stable conduits for Argent energy extraction. The greatest of these new constructions was the Nexus, a massive pyramid complex at the heart of the Argenta capital. Its central chamber housed an artifact the Makers called the Crucible, a crystalline key that, when activated by specific ritual, could open a controlled passage between dimensions. This device was presented to the Argenta as a sacred vessel for communing with Urdak, but its actual function was far more transgressive. It was designed to breach the walls between worlds, allowing direct access to Hell's energy sources. As these temples rose across Argent Denur, strange phenomena became increasingly common: atmospheric disturbances, unexplained disappearances, outbreaks of violent madness among citizens living near the sacred sites. The Night Sentinels investigated these occurrences, but found their inquiries subtly redirected by the Deeg priests, who attributed such events to increased divine presence that overwhelmed unprepared mortal consciousness. The truth was far more sinister. Each temple, each ritual conducted within its walls, created micro-tears in dimensional fabric. Through these invisibly small breaches, Hell's influence seeped into Argent Denur not yet as physical invasion but as spiritual corruption. Citizens who disappeared were not overcome by divine rapture as the priests claimed, but were the first mortal sacrifices in the unholy exchange between Urdak and Hell souls traded for power. In Urdak, the Khan Maker's condition stabilized through regular infusions of Hell-refined Argent energy. Her once imminent transfiguration was postponed indefinitely, disrupting the natural cycle of Maker leadership. This preservation came at tremendous cost to her essence. The Khan's consciousness, once purely aligned with the Father's design, now contained elements foreign to Urdak's nature. Her decisions became increasingly pragmatic rather than principled, focused on Maker survival at any cost. The Seraphim Council fractured into factions over these developments. Some embraced the new direction, seeing it as evolution beyond the father's original limitations. Others harbored grave concerns about dimensional contamination, particularly Samur Maker, who had initially supported controlled Argent harvesting, but now witnessed its consequences with growing alarm. These dissenting seraphim were gradually removed from positions of influence, reassigned to distant functions within Urdak's bureaucracy, where their objections would go unheard. On Argent Danur, the Night Sentinels remained largely ignorant of the cosmic corruption unfolding around them. Their elite warriors, those who had undergone the most extensive blessings with processed Argent, began experiencing disturbing visions during meditation. These glimpses into hell were interpreted as tests of faith rather than warnings, spurring the Sentinels to even greater devotion to the Makers and their priesthood. Among these warriors, the Sentinel Prime, who had risen to unprecedented heights, continued to distinguish himself. His enhanced body accepted Argent modifications that would have destroyed any other mortal, and his tactical mind seemed to comprehend dimensional warfare strategies instinctively. The Khan Maker took personal interest in this warrior's development, sensing in him a potential that transcended ordinary sentinel function, a weapon that could be directed against any who might threaten the new order. As the Second Age progressed, the boundaries between dimensions grew increasingly unstable. What began as microscopic tears evolved into temporary rifts, moments when the veil between Argent Danur and Hell parted enough for direct observation. The first documented rift occurred during a high ritual at the Nexus, when the combined spiritual energy of 10,000 worshippers, focused through the crucible, tore a momentary window between worlds. For 7 heartbeats, the assembled Argenta glimpsed the landscape of Hell, a realm of fire and twisted architecture that defied Euclidean principles. The Deeg priests, fully corrupted by this point, presented this catastrophic breach as divine revelation, the first sanctioned view of the lower realms that the Makers controlled as part of their cosmic dominion. This carefully constructed falsehood transformed potential panic into religious awe. The Argenta, who had worshipped the Makers as gods of light and order, now accepted that these same deities commanded realms of darkness as part of the cosmic balance. This theological revision prepared the ground for the next phase of Hell's infiltration. The Deeg priests introduced new rituals involving blood sacrifice animals at first, their life essence elevated to the gods through ceremonial killing. These practices, previously unknown in Argenta religion, were justified as necessary offerings to sustain divine favor in an increasingly demanding cosmos. The Night Sentinels, whose warrior code had always emphasized honorable combat rather than ritualistic slaughter, questioned these innovations but ultimately deferred to Maker authority. In the deepest chamber beneath the Nexus, the Deeg priests conducted the first human sacrifice, a criminal condemned to death, whose execution was repurposed as religious ceremony. The energy released by this ritualized killing, channeled through the crucible, created a stable rift between dimensions that remained open for a full-day cycle. Through this passage, the priests established direct communication with Hell's hierarchy, no longer requiring Maker intermediaries for their unholy communion. The success of this experiment led to the establishment of the Soul Extraction Protocols, a system designed to efficiently harvest mortal essence for conversion into Argent energy. The Deeg priests, with Maker guidance, constructed specialized facilities beneath each major temple, where condemned criminals and eventually selected citizens would be processed. These victims were told they had been chosen for transcendence ascension to serve directly in Urdak, when in reality their souls were being extracted and transferred to Hell in exchange for refined Argent energy. As this system expanded, the need for sacrifices grew beyond what could be sourced from Argenta society alone. The Night Sentinels, still believing they served divine will, were directed to conquer neighboring territories and bring back worthy subjects for elevation. These military campaigns transformed the Argenta from a defensive force into an expansionist empire, their conquests fueled by religious fervor that masked the true purpose, the acquisition of souls to feed the insatiable machinery of Argent production. The Khan Maker, now centuries past her intended transfiguration, had become something neither fully Maker nor entirely corrupted, a hybrid consciousness sustained by Hell's energy but still oriented toward Urdak's preservation. She rationalized each escalation as necessary evil, each compromise as temporary expedient. The father's continued silence was interpreted as tacit permission, his absence as opportunity for maker evolution beyond original constraints. In hell, the Dark Lord watched this corruption with cosmic patience. The alliance with Urdak was proceeding exactly as intended, the gradual subversion of divine order through its own desperation for survival. Each soul delivered, each rift opened, each argent transfer strengthened hell's influence, while weakening the dimensional barriers the Father had established at creation. The corruption of heaven would ultimately serve the expansion of hell, not through direct conquest, but through slow, irreversible contamination. On Argent D'Nur, the first uncontrolled breach occurred during the 10,000th soul extraction. A power surge in the Nexus facility caused a catastrophic failure in containment systems, creating a rift that could not be immediately closed. Through this opening came the first physical incursion of hell onto mortal soil, a small force of entities that would later be classified as demons. Though no such concept existed yet in Argenta understanding, the Night Sentinels responded with immediate force, containing the breach before most citizens became aware of the incident. The invading entities were destroyed, their remains studied by Sentinel commanders who were troubled by anatomical features that defied natural evolution, amalgamations of flesh, metal, and energy that suggested deliberate design rather than organic development. The Deeg priests dismissed these concerns, explaining these entities as lower servants of the cosmic hierarchy, dangerous only because mortals were unprepared for direct contact with their essence. This explanation satisfied most Sentinels, but a small faction led by commanders who had witnessed the breach firsthand began questioning the increasingly extreme direction of Argenta religion. These doubters were carefully monitored by the priests, their misgivings reported to the Khan Maker as potential threats to cosmic order. Among these skeptics was the Sentinel Prime, whose enhanced perception allowed him to sense the wrongness in the breach entities more acutely than his brothers. His questions, delivered with the directness of a soldier, rather than the deference of a worshipper, concerned the Deeg priesthood. Here was the greatest warrior of the Argenta, a living weapon they had helped create, now turning his analytical mind toward the inconsistencies in their carefully constructed narrative. The Khan Maker, recognizing both the danger and opportunity this warrior represented, summoned him directly to Urdak, an unprecedented honor for a mortal. In the celestial realm, the Sentinel Prime was shown carefully curated visions of the cosmic order, explanations of necessity that framed Maker actions as painful but unavoidable steps toward greater harmony. The warrior's loyalty was secured not through deception alone, but through partial truth, enough reality to satisfy his questions while omitting the full extent of corruption. Upon his return to Argent D'Nur, the Sentinel Prime became the strongest advocate for continued faith in Maker guidance, his first-hand experience in Urdak lending authority to his testimony. The doubters within the Night Sentinels were temporarily silenced, their concerns overshadowed by their commander's renewed conviction. The machinery of soul harvesting continued uninterrupted, its scale expanding as the Argenta Empire conquered further territories. In the shadows of this apparent unity, however, the first organized resistance formed. A small sect of Sentinels, calling themselves the Unbowed, began investigating the temples independently, documenting evidence of dimensional tampering and unauthorized rituals. They operated in absolute secrecy, knowing that accusation against the Deeg priests would be considered highest blasphemy, punishable by death. The Unbowed discovered fragments of the truth, enough to recognize that something fundamentally wrong had corrupted their civilization, but not enough to comprehend the cosmic scale of the violation. They believed the Deeg priests had betrayed Maker teaching rather than following its corrupted evolution. Their goal became documentation and eventual appeal directly to the Makers, unaware that the source of corruption extended to Urdak itself. As the Second Age approached its final phase, three civilizations stood on the brink of catastrophic convergence. Urdak had preserved its existence by compromising its essence, the Makers now dependent on energy sources that gradually altered their fundamental nature. Argent D'Nur had evolved from faithful civilization to expansionist empire, conquering in the name of gods who no longer deserved devotion. And Hell had secured its first footholds in the ordered dimensions, its influence spreading through every channel of Argent energy that flowed between realms. The Father, from his place beyond comprehension, observed as his perfect system approached critical failure. The Great Separation, the divine mandate that each dimension remain distinct, had been fundamentally compromised. Whether this was always his intention, or the result of free will exceeding its boundaries, remained a mystery that even the Khan Maker, with all her corrupted wisdom, could not penetrate. On the eve of what would later be called the Third Age, the Khan Maker gathered her most loyal seraphim and the Deig priests for a sacred convocation. She spoke of a new phase in cosmic evolution, a controlled merging of dimensional energies that would elevate both Maker and mortal existence beyond their original limitations. What she did not reveal was the price of this elevation, a covenant with Hell that would eventually consume everything it touched. In the chamber beneath this assembly, Samu Maker, the seraphim who had grown most concerned about Urdak's direction, accessed the most closely guarded secret of the new order. The Makers had captured and contained a fragment of the Father's consciousness before his withdrawal, a life sphere that contained enough of his essence to potentially restore the original balance. This artifact was being studied rather than implemented, the Khan having decided that restoration of the old order was less desirable than the power offered by the new alliance. Samur, recognizing both the opportunity and the grave risk this knowledge represented, began formulating a plan that would either save creation or shatter it beyond recognition. As the dimensional barriers weakened further, as the corruption of Urdak progressed toward irreversibility, this single seraphim committed himself to a path of cosmic treason, betrayal, in service to original divine intent rather than its corrupted evolution. The walls between worlds now stood on the verge of collapse, Hell's patience nearly exhausted as the time for true invasion approached. The Night Sentinels prepared for glory, unaware they were being positioned for annihilation, and at the center of these converging forces stood the Sentinel Prime, a warrior whose true purpose in the cosmic design remained unrevealed, a weapon created to serve gods who now served darkness, a mortal whose destiny would transcend the boundaries between all worlds. The Third Age began not with divine proclamation, but with the thunder of alien combat. Through dimensional fractures too numerous to seal, creatures of nightmare spilled onto the soil of Argent Denur, the first true invasion of Hell upon mortal lands. These were not the isolated incidents of previous breaches but coordinated assaults against Argenta settlements, testing the defenses of a civilization that had never faced an enemy it could not comprehend. The Night Sentinels responded with the disciplined fury for which they had been created. Their sacred weapons, long infused with Argent energy for battles against mortal foes, proved unexpectedly effective against these invaders. Blades of consecrated steel severed corrupted flesh, Argent-charged arrows pierced demonic forms that defied natural anatomy. Yet for each entity destroyed, more emerged from the growing rifts, a tide of cosmic malevolence pressing against reality's wounded barriers. It was during the defense of Sentinel Prime, the greatest city of the Argenta Empire, that destiny manifested in unlikely form. As Hell's forces breached the outer walls, as Night Sentinels formed desperate defensive lines around civilian evacuation points, a stranger appeared on the battlefield, a warrior not of Argenta blood, but of undeniable prowess. His origins were unknown, his armor foreign to Sentinel aesthetics, his weapons discharging energy in patterns never before witnessed on Argent Denur. Yet his purpose was immediately clear: the systematic destruction of everything that emerged from the dimensional tiers. The Night Sentinels, initially wary of this outsider, soon recognized the value of his inexplicable knowledge. This warrior knew how to kill the invaders with brutal efficiency, understood weaknesses in demonic anatomy that the Sentinels were still discovering through costly trial and error. Most significantly, he fought with a hatred that transcended ordinary combat motivation, a personal vengeance against these specific enemies, as though their previous encounters had left wounds beyond physical scarring. When the battle for Sentinel Prime concluded, the city secured but irreparably altered by its baptism in otherworldly conflict, the stranger was brought before the Commander Council of the Night Sentinels. His appearance generated immediate controversy. He was human in form but carried himself with a soldier's discipline unfamiliar to Argenta military tradition. His equipment suggested technological advancement beyond even Maker-guided development, and most troubling to the Council, he spoke of Hell with intimate knowledge, naming hierarchies and territories within the Dark Realm, that had never been revealed in any Maker teaching. The Sentinel Prime, now Commander Valen of the Night Sentinels, argued passionately for the stranger's integration into their ranks. "This warrior does not merely fight," Valen declared to his fellow commanders. "He exterminates with purpose, with knowledge born of experience no living being should possess. If the Dark Realm has sent its forces against us, the gods have sent us this weapon in answer." After ritual combat to prove his worthiness, a sacred tradition in which the stranger defeated 3 champion sentinels with methodical precision, the outsider was inducted into the Night Sentinels against the vehement objections of the Deeg priests. Their opposition only strengthened Valen's resolve, as the commander had grown increasingly suspicious of the priesthood's directives since the invasion began. The Deeg claimed the attacks were necessary tests rather than existential threats, a position that made little sense to warriors watching their homeland burn. The stranger, who offered no name that satisfied Argenta naming conventions, was given the designation Outlander in official records. His true identity remained a mystery. Deliberately preserved, this warrior volunteered nothing of his origins, and the Night Sentinels, respecting his silence as a soldier's prerogative, demanded no explanations beyond his demonstrated commitment to their cause. As Hell's incursions escalated from isolated attacks to sustained campaign, the Night Sentinels evolved from ceremonial guardians to frontline defenders of reality itself. The Outlander's combat knowledge proved invaluable, transforming Sentinel tactics from defensive containment to aggressive purging. He taught them to target dimensional anchors, points where rifts maintained stability, rather than merely engaging the entities that emerged. Under his guidance, specialized Sentinel units developed rift-sealing protocols that could close smaller breaches through focused Argent countermeasures. The Khan Maker, watching these developments through the divine senses of Urdak, recognized a potential disruption to her plans. The Outlander represented an unaccounted variable, a warrior with knowledge that could potentially reveal the true nature of the unholy covenant between Urdak and Hell. Yet direct intervention against him would raise questions she could not afford among her increasingly divided Seraphim Council. Instead, the Khan directed the Deeg priests to accelerate the next phase of dimensional integration. Beneath the temples of Argent Denur, the soul extraction facilities expanded their operations, processing conquered populations at unprecedented rates. The energy harvested from these sacrifices was channeled into new defensive systems. Massive Argent barriers erected around major Argenta cities, ostensibly protecting them from Hell's invasion, while actually serving as controlled gateways that the priests could open at will. For 3 years, the Night Sentinels held the line against Hell's advance, reclaiming territories, sealing breaches, developing increasingly effective countermeasures against demonic incursion. The Outlander fought at the forefront of every major campaign, his ferocity, undiminished by continuous combat, his tactical insight guiding the Sentinels to victories that defied conventional military logic. He became a legend among the Argenta population, a divine champion sent to complement their greatest warriors in the defense of creation itself. This period of relative stability, hard-won through Sentinel blood, but suggesting possible victory, ended with the catastrophe of the Black Star. During a major sealing operation at a breach in the Great Steppe, a new type of entity emerged, a titan of such enormous proportions that it blotted out the sun as it tore its way fully into Argent Denur's dimension. This colossus of corrupted flesh and molten armor, later recorded in Sentinel histories as the Black Star Titan, could not be harmed by conventional Sentinel weapons. Its advance crushed 3 cities before a desperate counterattack was formulated. The Outlander, consulting with Commander Valen and the champion Night Sentinels, proposed a solution that required direct intervention from the Makers, the deployment of the Crucible, the sacred artifact housed in the Nexus Temple. This weapon, he claimed, contained enough concentrated Argent energy to disrupt the Titan's dimensional cohesion, forcing it back into Hell or destroying it entirely. The Deeg priests initially refused this request, claiming the Crucible was a religious relic never intended for combat application. Their resistance continued until the Titan approached the outskirts of Sentinel Prime itself, threatening the heart of Argenta civilization. Only then did the High Priest Deeg Grav reluctantly authorize the weapon's release, though he insisted on personally overseeing its deployment rather than entrusting it to the Night Sentinels directly. The battle against the Black Star Titan became the most celebrated military engagement in Argenta history. Commander Valen led the main Sentinel force in diversionary action, drawing the Titan's attention with coordinated strikes against its lower extremities. Meanwhile, the Outlander and a small team of elite Sentinels ascended the Colossus itself, fighting through smaller demons that crawled across its surface like parasitic defenders. At the creature's core, a pulsing chamber of corrupted argent near what approximated its heart. Deeg Grav activated the crucible, transforming it from ceremonial artifact to weapon of dimensional sundering. The resulting energy discharge tore through the Titan from within, causing a chain reaction that collapsed its physical form back through the dimensional rift from which it had emerged. The backlash sealed dozens of smaller breaches across the region, creating the first period of true respite since the invasion began. The Night Sentinels returned to Sentinel Prime as heroes, the population celebrating their victory as proof that even Hell's mightiest forces could be defeated through courage and divine favor. In the aftermath of this triumph, a subtle shift occurred in Argenta society. The Night Sentinels, rather than the Deeg priests, became the primary focus of public adoration. Commander Valen, the Outlander, and their champion warriors were elevated in popular consciousness from mere military leaders to saviors of civilization itself. This transfer of spiritual authority from religious hierarchy to warrior elite concerned the Khan Maker, who recognized the potential for Night Sentinel interference in the soul harvesting operations that sustained Urdak's power. To counter this threat, the Khan initiated the most profound corruption yet of her original purpose. Through the Deeg priests, she introduced a new theological framework to the Argenta, the concept of Sentinel Ascension. Warriors who fell in battle against Hell's forces would not merely die, but would be elevated to serve eternally in Urdak as spiritual guardians. This doctrine provided cultural acceptance for the increased combat casualties that the Khan knew were coming, while ensuring that the souls of fallen Sentinels would be harvested for Argent production rather than lost to natural death processes. The Night Sentinels embraced this doctrine with solemn determination. The promise of eternal purpose transformed their already formidable courage into something approaching fatalism, not a death wish, but a profound acceptance that their physical forms were temporary vessels serving eternal design. Only the Outlander remained skeptical, though he kept his doubts private from all except Commander Valen, with whom he had developed a bond of warrior brotherhood transcending their different origins. It was during this period of military ascendancy that the personal element that would ultimately shatter Argenta civilization entered the cosmic equation. Commander Valen's only son, a young warrior who had recently completed Sentinel training, was deployed to defend a remote outpost near a sealed breach. When Hell forces launched a surprise offensive at multiple points simultaneously, this outpost was overwhelmed before reinforcements could arrive. The recovery teams found no survivors, no bodies, only evidence suggesting the defenders had been taken alive through the reopened breach. Valen's grief manifested as military fury. The commander launched increasingly aggressive campaigns to seal breaches and destroy Hell's footholds on Argent Denur, driving his Night Sentinels beyond previous limitations. The Outlander remained at his side throughout these operations, his own hatred of Hell seemingly resonating with Valen's personal vendetta. Together, they achieved victories that should have been impossible, pushing back the Dark Realm's influence across multiple territories. Then came the visitation that would alter destiny itself. During meditation before a major offensive, Commander Valen experienced what he believed was divine revelation, but was actually direct contact from Hell's hierarchy. In this vision, he saw his son alive but transformed, held in a specific location within Hell's domain. The entity communicating with Valen, presenting itself as a guide rather than tormentor, offered terms: access to this location in exchange for a single act of cooperation. The commander, his judgment clouded by grief and desperate hope, kept this visitation secret from everyone, even the Outlander. Instead, he made private contact with Deeg Grav, the High Priest, who controlled access to the largest dimensional breach yet discovered. Their conversation, unrecorded in any official history but preserved in Hell's own chronicles, established the foundation for the greatest betrayal in Sentinel history. Deeg Grav, long corrupted by Hell's influence through the Khan Maker's unholy covenant, presented Valen with a formal pact. The priest would provide access to the specific region of Hell where Valen's son was allegedly held. In exchange, Valen would disable a critical section of Sentinel defenses during the next major incursion, allowing Hell's forces unprecedented access to Argent D'Nur's central regions. The commander, seeing only the possibility of rescuing his child, accepted these terms with a soldier's decisive commitment to action regardless of personal cost. What Valen could not know, what no mortal could comprehend, was that this arrangement had been orchestrated from the beginning. Hell's forces had specifically targeted his son's outpost, had specifically preserved the young warrior for this exact purpose. The corruption of Urdak had provided the blueprint for the corruption of Argenta's greatest defender, the exploitation of love as vulnerability, of hope as weapon. On the day recorded in Argenta history as the unholy betrayal, Commander Valen fulfilled his agreement. During a coordinated defense of 7 major cities against simultaneous Hell attacks, he diverted key Night Sentinel units away from a seemingly minor breach near the Argent Energy Distribution Facility. Through this undefended entry point poured Hell's elite forces, targeting not population centers but the dimensional anchors that stabilized Argent D'Nur's position in the cosmic order. By the time the Night Sentinels realized what was happening, it was too late to prevent catastrophe. The dimensional anchors, artifacts of Maker design that maintained Argent D'Nur's separation from Hell, were systematically destroyed, creating a cascade effect that tore reality itself. Cities, mountains, entire regions began shifting between dimensions, the boundaries between Argent D'Nur and Hell dissolving like salt structures in rising water. The Outlander, leading the desperate counterattack at the main breach, fought with unprecedented fury even by his extraordinary standards. Sentinel records describe him carving a path through Hell's armies alone after his supporting units fell, reaching the central distribution facility only to find Commander Valen already there, not defending the final anchor, but watching in silent despair as it crumbled under demonic assault. The confrontation between these blood brothers, one born of Argent D'Nur, one adopted from unknown origin, remains a scene of mythic tragedy in Sentinel chronicles. Valen made no attempt to deny his actions, explaining with a soldier's directness the choice he had made to save his son. The Outlander, in return, revealed knowledge he had kept hidden, that Hell never honored such bargains, that the commander's son was indeed alive, but transformed beyond recognition into one of the very demons they had fought against for years. This truth, delivered without cruelty but without compromise, broke something fundamental in Commander Valen. The realization that he had sacrificed his civilization, his honor, his sworn duty for a lie designed specifically to exploit his greatest vulnerability, transformed his despair into self-destructive rage. He attacked the Outlander not with military precision, but with the abandoned fury of a man with nothing left to lose or preserve. Their combat shook the already unstable facility as Argent D'Nur continued its inexorable dimensional collapse. The Outlander fought defensively, attempting to subdue rather than kill his former commander, but Valen's berserker assault left no room for restraint. The battle ended only when the facility began its final disintegration, the floor beneath them tearing open into the void between worlds. The Outlander, making a final attempt to save his friend, reached for Valen as the commander slipped into the dimensional tear. Their hands met for a moment before cosmic forces pulled them in different directions, the Outlander thrown clear of the immediate collapse, Valen drawn into the heart of the cataclysm he had enabled. In the hours that followed, the Night Sentinels mounted a desperate evacuation of Argent D'Nur's population, fighting through demonic forces to reach civilian gathering points. The Outlander led these operations with grim efficiency, his knowledge of Hell's tactics proving crucial in establishing defensive corridors through which thousands escaped the initial dimensional collapse. But for each Argenta saved, thousands more were lost, consumed by Hell's advance, or trapped in regions already shifted partly into the Dark Realm. As Sentinel Prime itself began to shudder with dimensional instability, as the great temples cracked and the sacred plazas warped under forces they were never designed to withstand, the final act of Argent D'Nur's tragedy unfolded in the inner sanctum of the Nexus. Here, Samur Maker, the Seraphim who had grown increasingly concerned about Urdak's corruption, enacted his long-prepared contingency. The Seraphim had identified in the Outlander something unique, an essence that resonated with fundamental forces in ways no other being demonstrated. This warrior, whose hatred of hell seemed woven into his very existence, possessed qualities that might be enhanced beyond mortal limitations through direct divine intervention. In the chaos of Argent D'Neur's collapse, with the Khan's attention focused on managing the dimensional catastrophe, Samur found his opportunity. The Seraphim brought the Outlander to the Divinity Machine, a maker device capable of restructuring beings at their most fundamental level. This technology, created for maker evolution but never used due to the Khan's fears of unpredictable outcomes, represented Samur's desperate gambit against the corruption-consuming creation. Against all maker protocol, operating without authorization from the Khan or the Seraphim Council, Samur activated the machine with the Outlander inside. What emerged was no longer merely the extraordinary warrior who had fought alongside the Night Sentinels, but something transcendent, a being infused with divine power yet anchored in mortal hatred. A weapon against hell, forged from hell's own most potent adversary. The energy readings from this transformation overwhelmed Erdak's monitoring systems, temporarily blinding the Khan to Samur's unauthorized action. This newly empowered entity, no longer the Outlander, but not yet recognized by the title that would echo across dimensions, led the final defense of the remaining Argenta. His capabilities now extended beyond physical combat, to include manipulation of Argent energy itself, allowing him to seal breaches temporarily through sheer force of will. These abilities bought precious time for the last evacuation ships to launch, carrying a fragment of Argenta civilization away from their collapsing homeworld. As the dimensional merger reached its final stage, as Argent D'Neur's physical laws bent irreversibly toward Hell's configuration, the transformed warrior made his ultimate choice. Rather than fleeing with the evacuees, he turned toward the largest breach, a direct passage into Hell's domain that had opened in the ruins of the Nexus Temple. With weapons charged by his own augmented essence, he stepped deliberately into the Dark Realm, beginning what Hell's chronicles would record as the longest, most devastating one-man crusade ever mounted against its territories. Argent D'Neur, birthplace of the Night Sentinels, and crown jewel of mortal civilization under Makra guidance, ceased to exist as a distinct dimension. Its landmass, its sacred sites, its mountains and cities were absorbed into Hell, not destroyed but corrupted, transformed into new territories within the Dark Realm's expanding dominion. The souls of Argenta who died during the collapse were harvested en masse, creating an unprecedented surge in Argent energy production that the Khan Maker accepted without public acknowledgement of its source. In the aftermath of this catastrophe, the surviving Argenta refugees established settlements in dimensional pockets provided by sympathetic Seraphim, limited spaces between reality's fragments where Hell's influence could be temporarily held at bay. The Night Sentinels, their numbers drastically reduced, but their purpose intensified by tragedy, reorganized around a single sacred mission: to honor their homeland by continuing the war against those who had consumed it. Commander Valen, presumed lost in the dimensional collapse, had suffered a fate worse than death. His fall through reality's tear had indeed taken him to the region where his son was held a cruel fulfillment of Hell's bargain. There, he witnessed the complete transformation of his child into a demon lord, a process that had begun long before Valen's betrayal made it irreversible. This confirmation of his exploitation, of the futility of his sacrifice, completed his breaking. In Hell's chronicles, he received a new designation, the Betrayer, and was preserved as a living trophy of Hell's most consequential victory. The being who had entered Hell alone, the Outlander, transformed by the Divinity Machine, embarked on a rampage that defied comprehension even by Hell's elastic standards of time and destruction. Moving through the Dark Realm with unstoppable momentum, he targeted the strongest entities, the most secure fortresses, the most sacred sites, with methodical fury. Hell's hierarchies deployed their mightiest champions against him, only to watch them fall. Before combat techniques, no demon had encountered fighting methods developed across realities this warrior had experienced before his arrival on Argent D'Neur. Hell's lords, faced with an enemy they could neither corrupt nor destroy through conventional means, enacted their most desperate containment protocol. An artifact of immense power, a sarcophagus designed specifically to neutralize beings of divine essence, was prepared at tremendous cost in demonic resources. Through elaborate deception involving dimensional manipulation beyond even Maker capability, they lured the rampaging warrior into a trap that even his enhanced awareness could not detect in time. The sarcophagus closed around him at the moment of apparent victory over a major Hell Lord, its inscribed sigils neutralizing the divine energy that empowered him beyond mortality. Even in this moment of capture, his ferocity was such that 4 of Hell's strongest titans were required to complete the sealing ritual. The sarcophagus was then entombed in a forgotten temple deep within Hell's most secure realm, removed from all maps, guarded by wards designed to prevent detection by either mortal or divine senses. In Urdak, the Khan Maker declared the loss of Argent D'Nur regrettable but necessary, an evolutionary step in the cosmic order that would ultimately serve greater harmony. The Makers who questioned this interpretation, including Samur, who had temporarily vanished after his act of rebellion, were systematically removed from Urdak's hierarchy. The alliance with Hell deepened, with soul-harvesting operations now expanded to include other mortal dimensions peripheral to the main cosmic framework. The surviving Night Sentinels, operating from their dimensional refuges, continued targeted strikes against Hell's territories. They had lost their homeland, their command structure, and many of their sacred traditions, but they preserved one element above all others, the legend of the warrior who had fought beside them and then entered Hell alone to continue the war they could no longer sustain at full scale. In their chronicles, they gave him the title by which he would eventually be known across all dimensions, a designation that acknowledged his transcendence from mere soldier to cosmic force, the Doomslayer. As the Third Age drew to its close, as the remnants of Argent D'Nur's civilization struggled to preserve their existence in dimensional margins, as Urdak descended further into corrupt symbiosis with Hell, as the Dark Realm expanded its influence across reality's wounded architecture, the Slayer remained entombed, but not eliminated, a weapon temporarily neutralized, but not destroyed. His hatred, his purpose, his very essence, remained intact within the sarcophagus, sustained by the same divine energy that made him Hell's most feared adversary. In the space between dimensions, in the void where cosmic forces intersect beyond mortal comprehension, something shifted in response to this temporary equilibrium. The Father, whose attention had seemed withdrawn from creation since the Khan's first compromise, focused momentarily on the sealed warrior, this unexpected variable in the cosmic equation, this mortal elevated beyond design parameters, this potential instrument of either restoration or final collapse. Whether in approval or concern, whether as creator or observer, the Father marked the Slayer's presence in the cosmic record, ensuring that even in containment, this being would remain a factor in the wars to come. The Third Age ended not with resolution but with terrible promise, the certainty that the conflicts it had witnessed were merely opening movements in a symphony of destruction that would eventually consume all creation. Dimensions now stood corrupted or threatened, divine beings served unholy purposes, and mortal civilizations became resources in cosmic machinery they could never comprehend. Yet within this darkness, sealed away from all reality, but preserved by forces beyond Hell's understanding, remained the single warrior whose hatred burned brighter than Argent energy itself, a weapon awaiting the hand of destiny, a slayer temporarily denied his purpose. The Fourth Age dawned not in the cosmic realms of Urdak or Hell, but on Earth, the third primordial dimension created by the Father, long developing in isolation while greater powers waged war across reality. Humanity had evolved without Maker guidance, advancing through its own cycles of creation and destruction, unaware of its place in the larger dimensional framework. This isolation ended not with divine revelation, but through mortal ambition, the relentless human drive to exceed limitations regardless of consequence. The Union Aerospace Corporation emerged in the late 21st century as Earth's dominant industrial entity, a conglomerate that had outgrown mere corporate status to become a quasi-governmental power with territorial sovereignty over its primary installations. UAC's public mission emphasized energy research, colonial expansion, and technological advancement for human benefit. Its true purpose, shaped by influences its leadership could not fully comprehend, pointed toward dimensional boundaries humanity was never meant to breach. Dr. Elena Richardson, director of UAC's Advanced Research Division, recorded the first verifiable contact with extra-dimensional energy in 2096. During experiments with particle acceleration beyond conventional physical limits, her team documented anomalous energy signatures that defied classification within the standard model. These emissions, registering primarily in the infrared spectrum with peculiar quantum fluctuations, exhibited properties that suggested their origin lay outside conventional spacetime. Richardson's preliminary report, later classified at the highest security level, contained an observation that would alter human destiny. The energy patterns suggest not random quantum phenomena, but organization indicative of external intelligence, as though something beyond our dimensional boundary is responding to our experimental probes. UAC's board of directors, recognizing both the scientific and commercial implications, authorized the Mars Research Operation, the largest off-world installation in human history, constructed on the Red Planet to maximize isolation for high-risk dimensional research. Mars offered perfect conditions: minimal population, natural radiation shielding in abandoned mining complexes, and sufficient distance from Earth to contain potential catastrophic outcomes. The official announcement emphasized Mars's reduced gravity as ideal for manufacturing processes and its position as a stepping stone for deeper space exploration. The actual facility, built into the Martian bedrock beneath these legitimate operations, housed technology designed for one purpose: controlled breaching of dimensional barriers to access the energy sources Richardson's team had detected. Dr. Olivia Pierce joined the Mars operation in 2115 as chief research scientist, bringing unprecedented expertise in theoretical multidimensional physics. Her academic background showed remarkable intuition regarding dimensional boundary mechanics, though colleagues noted her research often leaped to conclusions without clear methodological paths. What none recognized was that Pierce's insights came not from scientific deduction alone, but from something that had been whispering to her since childhood, a voice from beyond conventional reality that had guided her career toward this precise position. Under Pierce's direction, the Mars facility expanded its experimental parameters beyond Richardson's cautious protocols. Where the original research team had limited their work to observation and minimal energy extraction, Pierce advocated direct dimensional punctures controlled, temporary openings, into what she termed the energy dimension. The UAC board approved these escalations based on preliminary results that promised revolutionary power generation capabilities, clean, unlimited energy that would transform human civilization and UAC's market position simultaneously. The first successful dimensional breach occurred on the 23rd of November 2124. A precisely calibrated rupture sustained for 7.3 seconds, through which instruments recorded energy readings that exceeded all theoretical maximums. The breach sealed itself without intervention, but not before something passed through not physical matter, but information, complex data patterns that infiltrated the facility's systems and remained dormant, undetected by security protocols. In the following months, the Mars team documented a phenomenon they called dimensional bleed, subtle alterations in local physics following each experimental breach. Materials exhibited unexpected properties, electronic systems developed operational patterns not present in their programming, and research personnel reported vivid dreams featuring landscapes of impossible geometry and beings composed of energy rather than matter. Pierce recognized these symptoms not as concerning side effects but as confirmation of her theories. In private communications with UAC's inner directorate, she advocated for expanded breach protocols, larger openings, sustained for longer periods, with direct collection apparatus to harvest the energy she now called argent plasma in her classified reports. The terminology appeared to be her own creation, though internal psychological evaluations noted she could not explain why this specific designation seemed appropriate. Samuel Hayden, UAC's Director of Defense Advanced Research Projects, initially opposed Pierce's aggressive approach. A brilliant scientist with military background, Hayden emphasized containment and comprehensive analysis over rapid exploitation. His objections focused particularly on the information security implications, the possibility that data flowing through dimensional breaches might carry hostile programming or unknown corruption vectors. The conflict between Pierce and Hayden represented more than professional disagreement. It embodied the fundamental tension between exploitation and protection that would define humanity's relationship with Argent energy. Their philosophical divergence might have preserved crucial safeguards had fate not intervened in tragic form. In 2126, Samuel Hayden was diagnosed with terminal stage 4 brain cancer. The disease, aggressive and inoperable, left Earth's foremost scientific mind facing imminent mortality at the height of his intellectual powers. Unwilling to accept this conclusion to his work, Hayden authorized a radical procedure developed in UAC's experimental medical division, the transfer of his consciousness into a mechanized body constructed specifically to house a human mind. The procedure succeeded beyond medical expectations, but at tremendous cost to Hayden's humanity. His new form, a 3-meter-tall mechanoid chassis with advanced neural integration, preserved his cognitive functions but severed most sensory connections to human experience. This transformation altered his perspective on dimensional research in ways his colleagues could not anticipate. Having crossed one boundary between existence states, Hayden's opposition to breaching others diminished significantly. With Hayden's objections withdrawn, Pierce received authorization for the Lazarus Project, a massive expansion of dimensional breach capabilities, including permanent gateway construction rather than temporary punctures. The facility, built in Mars's deepest accessible cavern system, incorporated both energy collection technology and military-grade containment protocols, acknowledging for the first time the potential for physical intrusion from beyond the breach. The true nature of what lay beyond these dimensional openings remained officially undefined in UAC documentation. Pierce's reports described it clinically as the Argent Dimension, a realm of pure energy, with occasional suggestions of organized intelligence. Private communications within her inner research circle used different terminology, references to ancient religious concepts that seemed increasingly inappropriate in scientific context. Terms like afterlife, damnation, and hell appeared with growing frequency in personal logs, though always metaphorical rather than literal in official capacity. The first permanent dimensional gateway activated on the 7th of June 2129. Unlike previous temporary breaches, this connection was designed to remain open indefinitely, with containment fields preventing anything except controlled energy extraction. The gateway's activation coincided with a Mars-wide power surge that temporarily disabled all non-essential systems, including several monitoring stations overlooking the Lazarus facility. When full surveillance capability returned, Pierce reported complete success. The gateway maintained stable configuration, Argent plasma flowed through collection apparatus at predicted rates, and containment fields functioned at optimal parameters. What the official report omitted were the voices now audible near the gateway whispers, at the edge of perception that equipment could record but not translate, communication attempts from entities on the dimension's other side. UAC's leadership, presented with energy production statistics that promised to revolutionize human civilization, authorized immediate expansion. Additional gateways were constructed throughout the Mars facility, each larger than its predecessor, each drawing more Argent plasma for refinement into usable energy sources. The first Argent-powered production facilities began operation on Mars in 2130, manufacturing goods with efficiency that conventional energy could never match. Earth received its first Argent energy shipment in 2131, heavily refined, ostensibly purified of any dimensional contaminants. The public announcement described it as clean fusion developed on Mars, with no mention of extra-dimensional origins. The introduction of this energy source transformed Earth's economic landscape overnight, with UAC's market value exceeding the combined GDP of all non-aligned nations. As Argent energy revolutionized human industry, subtle changes manifested across Earth's population centers. Crime statistics showed increased violence in regions with highest Argent utilization. Mental health facilities reported unprecedented admission rates for conditions involving auditory hallucinations and religious delusions. Corporate security classified these correlations, but commissioned additional studies while accelerating Argent integration into global infrastructure. On Mars, the changes manifested more directly. Personnel assigned to Lazarus, project facilities, experienced psychological alterations that Pierce classified as dimensional attunement, increased intuitive understanding of Argent plasma properties, accompanied by personality, shifts toward obsessive work patterns and unusual religious ideation. Rather than addressing these changes as concerning side effects, Pierce incorporated them into the research program, selecting staff specifically for their susceptibility to what she now openly called the influence. By 2132, the Mars facility had evolved beyond conventional corporate research installation into something approaching religious order. Personnel adorned their workspaces with symbols that appeared in dreams. Engineers modified equipment based on intuitions rather than established physics, and security protocols increasingly focused on controlling information flow back to Earth rather than protecting staff from external threats. Dr. Pierce established the Lazarus Council's 7 senior researchers who demonstrated the strongest attunement to Argent energy. This group conducted private ceremonies near the largest gateway, activities excluded from official reports but recorded in security logs as communion protocols. Under their guidance, the dimensional research expanded to include biological applications, testing Argent exposure on cellular samples, then animal subjects, and eventually human volunteers from among the most devoted staff. Samuel Hayden, his mechanical form immune to the psychological influence affecting human personnel, recognized the dangerous direction of Pierce's work, but calculated intervention would cause more immediate harm than continued observation. Instead, he established a separate research division focused on weaponizing Argent energy, developing technology that could potentially counteract whatever emerged from the dimensional gateways if containment protocols failed. The inevitable breach occurred on the 18th of September, 2134. During a high-volume extraction operation, containment fields around Gateway 3 fluctuated for 27 seconds, sufficient time for something physical to emerge from the dimensional opening. Security records described a biological entity approximately 2 meters tall, with humanoid configuration but non-human anatomical features. The intruder killed 3 security personnel before containment teams neutralized it with experimental Argent-based weapons. This incident, classified at the highest level, should have triggered immediate protocol revision. Instead, Pierce's report to UAC leadership characterized it as a significant research opportunity, the first confirmed biological specimen from the Argent dimension, offering unprecedented study potential. The corpse was transferred to the Biological Research Division, where analysis revealed cellular structures incorporating both organic material and Argent energy in stable configuration. A previously theoretical condition Pierce had termed Argent symbiosis. Rather than limiting gateway operations after this incursion, the Lazarus Council expanded them, constructing larger openings with modified containment protocols designed to allow small-scale biological transfers under controlled conditions. The official justification emphasized scientific necessity and potential medical applications, but internal communications revealed different motivation. The entities seek compatible vessels. We must understand the integration process to properly facilitate the coming communion. Through 2135, the Mars facility documented 43 additional biological incursions, each more complex than its predecessor. The entities, now classified in 7 taxonomic categories based on morphology and behavior, demonstrated increasing intelligence and deliberate purpose. The final incident report filed before General Communications blackout described a coordinated breach attempt involving multiple entities working in apparent cooperation to undermine containment fields. Earth received its last routine transmission from Mars on the 7th of November 2136. The message, a standard operations update from Pierce's office, contained no indication of crisis, but concluded with a non-standard notation: "The path is prepared, the worthy rise. The rest will serve." Subsequent communication attempts received automated system responses indicating temporary service interruption due to maintenance operations. After 3 weeks without substantive contact, UAC's board dispatched a military assessment team to determine the Mars facility's status. This team, comprising elite security personnel with advanced weapons and Argent-resistant shielding, established orbit around Mars, but reported unusual energy readings, preventing safe landing near primary installations. Their final transmission described massive biological activity across the planet's surface before communication terminated abruptly. The truth, pieced together later from fragmentary records, revealed catastrophic containment failure across all Mars gateways, deliberate sabotage by Lazarus Council members acting under Pierce's direction. The dimensional barriers, systematically weakened through years of unregulated extraction, collapsed entirely, allowing unrestricted access from what facility recordings now openly identified as Hell. The Mars installation transformed from research facility to forward operating base for invasion forces, with human personnel either eliminated or converted through Argent-based biological reconfiguration. Only one section maintained partial independence, Samuel Hayden's Advanced Defense Division, where mechanical systems proved resistant to demonic corruption. Hayden, recognizing the existential threat to humanity, enacted emergency protocols never disclosed to UAC leadership. His division had discovered something beyond conventional weaponry, an artifact of extraterrestrial origin found buried in Mars's polar region during early colonization and kept secret from even the highest corporate authorities. Ancient records tentatively identified this artifact as a sarcophagus, though its construction defied human manufacturing capabilities. Its surface bore inscriptions in no recognized language, symbols that resonated with Argent energy in patterns suggesting containment rather than enhancement. Hayden's team had studied this object for decades without activating it, recognizing its potential importance but unable to determine its purpose with certainty. As Hell's forces overran the Mars facility, as human survivors dwindled and converted personnel constructed bloody shrines to entities emerging through the gateways, Hayden made the decision that would alter humanity's fate. His mechanized form, immune to the corruption spreading through biological systems, personally transported the sarcophagus to his division's most secure laboratory, and enacted the release sequence his researchers had theorized but never implemented. The sarcophagus opened for the first time in millennia, releasing not treasure or knowledge, but a being, a warrior, in armor of design unlike any human or demonic configuration, preserved in stasis rather than death. This entity, awakening to a facility overrun by creatures it recognized immediately, reacted not with confusion but with focused fury. Security recordings documented its first actions upon release: the systematic acquisition of weapons, followed by efficient, methodical advance into Hell-controlled territories. Hayden established limited communication with this being, identifying it through artifact analysis as a warrior of significance to the invading forces. The entity, designated Doomslayer in translated inscriptions, responded to tactical information but ignored attempts at control or direction, demonstrating singular purpose that aligned temporarily with human survival needs without submitting to human authority. The Slayer's campaign through the Mars facility defied conventional combat analysis, moving with speed and precision impossible for human physiology, utilizing Argent-based weaponry with intuitive mastery. This warrior eliminated demonic presence with methodical thoroughness that suggested not merely military training, but evolutionary specialization for this specific function. Most significantly, the Slayer appeared to strengthen through combat, absorbing energy from fallen enemies, growing more formidable with each engagement, rather than depleting reserves as human combatants would. Olivia Pierce, now fully transformed by Argent corruption into something between human and demon, recognized the Slayer immediately, not from personal knowledge, but through the collective memory of the Hell forces she now served. Her communications, broadcast throughout the facility as the Slayer advanced, revealed the cosmic significance of what Hayden had unknowingly released. The Doomslayer has returned. The prophecy will not be denied. All who stand between the Slayer and the Hell priests will be destroyed. The final confrontation occurred at the largest gateway, the Master Portal, through which Pierce intended to facilitate full-scale invasion of the human dimension. The Slayer, having carved a path of destruction through thousands of demonic entities, confronted Pierce as she completed the ritual to permanently stabilize the dimensional breach. Their battle destroyed the facility's central energy core, destabilizing the portal configuration, but not before Pierce, in her final moments, transmitted herself bodily into Hell, not fleeing death but seeking transformation beyond her already corrupted form. With the immediate threat neutralized, Samuel Hayden reasserted control over surviving facility systems. The Slayer, having fulfilled immediate combat objectives, turned attention toward a new target, the Argent processing system, that continued harvesting energy despite catastrophic containment failures throughout the installation. To Hayden's protest, the warrior systematically destroyed these processes, severing the primary conduits between dimensions, rather than allowing controlled exploitation to continue. This action forced Hayden's intervention. Using security protocols embedded throughout the facility, he temporarily neutralized the Slayer, not through direct combat, which records indicated would have been futile, but through environmental systems designed to contain Argent-based entities. With the warrior incapacitated, Hayden extracted and secured a device the Slayer had acquired during the campaign, the Crucible, an artifact of clearly non-human origin that facility records associated with catastrophic events in dimensions beyond Earth's knowledge. In his final communication before implementing emergency evacuation protocols, Samuel Hayden addressed the unconscious Slayer with words that acknowledged both necessity and foreknowledge of consequences. "I am not the villain in this story. I do what I do because there is no choice. Our continued survival demands the extraction and utilization of Argent energy. You have no authority to interfere with its collection. What you destroyed was worth more than your entire civilization. Rest assured, we will meet again." Hayden's mechanized form, carrying both the Crucible and critical research data, returned to Earth aboard the sole surviving transport vessel. The Mars facility, its dimensional breaches temporarily sealed, but its infrastructure compromised beyond recovery, was designated quarantine zone under UAC emergency protocols. Earth authorities, presented with heavily redacted reports emphasizing containment rather than full disclosure, implemented planetary defense measures without public acknowledgement of the actual threat nature. The Slayer, rendered unconscious by Hayden's intervention, was transported not to Earth but to an undisclosed location through means not recorded in any recoverable system. This deliberate separation, the warrior who could combat Hell's forces removed from the dimension most vulnerable to invasion, would prove the most consequential decision of the Fourth Age. In the aftermath of the Mars catastrophe, UAC underwent organizational transformation that preserved its external corporate structure, while fundamentally altering its internal operations. Samuel Hayden, his mechanical form now housing the only complete understanding of dimensional threats, assumed effective control of the organization's highest research divisions. The public narrative emphasized industrial accident rather than interdimensional breach, with memorial services for Mars personnel focusing on sacrifice for human advancement rather than consumption by extra-dimensional entities. Argent energy production continued under revised protocols, with new extraction facilities established on other planetary bodies, with minimal personnel presence and maximum automated security. The technology derived from Mars research spread throughout human civilization, transforming everything from transportation to medicine to weapons development. Each application carrying microscopic corruption potential too diffuse to detect through conventional means. Earth entered a period of unprecedented prosperity and technological advancement, unaware that each Argent-powered innovation extended Hell's influence further into human dimension. The corruption manifested not as obvious possession or physical transformation, but as subtle societal shifts, increased acceptance of authority, normalization of surveillance, ritualization of corporate practices in ways that echoed religious devotion rather than commercial efficiency. UAC's public messaging evolved to incorporate subliminal elements drawn from the symbols discovered on Mars, their marketing materials gradually introducing concepts that prepared human consciousness for dimensional integration rather than resistance. The corporate slogan, "Powering Progress Through Sacrifice," contained layers of meaning apparent only to those with direct knowledge of Argent energy's true source. The most significant development occurred not in public view, but in UAC's deepest research installation beneath the Arctic ice. Here, Samuel Hayden established Project Lazarus, not a continuation of Pierce's work, but its antithesis, focused on understanding and potentially countering Hell's influence rather than facilitating it. At this facility's core, behind security measures incorporating both technological and dimensional barriers, Hayden stored the Crucible studying its properties while keeping it isolated from potential corruption vectors. The research yielded unexpected insights. The artifact contained energy patterns suggesting origin not in Hell but in another dimension entirely, one whose signature matched no known cosmic framework. More significantly, The crucible appeared to respond to specific Argent configurations, activating partially when exposed to energy patterns matching those recorded during the Slayer's combat operations. This suggested connection between the warrior and the weapon, beyond mere utilization, a resonance at fundamental, dimensional level that implied shared origin or purpose. As the Fourth Age drew to its close, three primary forces stood poised in unstable equilibrium. Earth's civilization, enhanced by Argent technology but increasingly susceptible to Hell's subtle corruption, expanded throughout the solar system, while remaining ignorant of the bargain their advancement represented. Hell's dimensional presence, temporarily contained but not eliminated, gathered strength behind weakened barriers, adapting its infiltration strategies based on knowledge gained during the Mars incursion. And somewhere beyond conventional dimensional tracking, the Slayer remained neither destroyed nor neutralized, but temporarily removed from the cosmic equation, a variable whose reintroduction would inevitably alter its balance. In Urdak, the Khan Maker observed these developments with calculated interest. The human dimension's independent discovery of Argent energy represented unexpected opportunity, a new soul source not directly arranged through existing covenants, but potentially harvestable nonetheless. The Slayer's re-emergence concerned her more significantly, as Maker records documented this warrior's potential to disrupt even divine plans when properly motivated and equipped. The Father, from his place beyond comprehension, watched as his dimensional creation continued its evolution toward convergence rather than separation. Whether this represented failure of original design or fulfillment of deeper purpose remained beyond mortal understanding, a cosmic question that would find answer only in the fires of the coming conflict. When humanity's technological ambition collided with Hell's existential hunger and the Slayer's eternal purpose. The stage was set for the Fifth Age, when dimensions would war not through proxies or limited incursions, but in direct confrontation, when the barriers between worlds would tear beyond repair, when gods and demons and mortals would face final judgment in the crucible of creation's greatest trial. The Fifth Age began with a silence. 3 years passed after the Mars catastrophe without further dimensional incursion, a deceptive calm that allowed humanity to rebuild its confidence while remaining blind to the corruption spreading through its most advanced systems. Earth continued its Argent-powered expansion, establishing colonies throughout the solar system, each new outpost unwittingly extending Hell's influence further into human territory. This was not peace, but preparation, the quiet before a storm that would engulf not merely worlds but dimensions themselves. The stillness broke on the 13th of November 2139, when 6 major Earth cities experienced simultaneous power grid failures. Emergency systems activated as expected, drawing on backup Argent reserves, but rather than restoring stability, these activations triggered secondary cascades throughout connected infrastructure. Urban defense networks, medical systems, and communication arrays transformed from human services into dimensional breach points. What appeared as technical malfunction was in fact meticulous sabotage, Hell's first coordinated offensive against the human dimension. Through these breaches, poured entities, unlike any documented during the Mars incident, not merely demons, but organized invasion forces with clear strategic objectives. Their target was not random destruction, but systematic capture of Argent distribution nodes, transforming human power infrastructure into a network of stable dimensional gateways. Within hours, 12% of Earth's urban centers were under direct demonic control, with conventional military responses proving catastrophically ineffective against entities that violated physical laws humanity had built its defense doctrine upon. Samuel Hayden, monitoring the invasion from UAC's Arctic facility, recognized patterns that matched Mars security recordings, not merely similar forces, but identical command structures, suggesting direct continuation of the campaign the Slayer had temporarily halted. This was not opportunistic incursion, but executed vengeance, Hell's response to humanity's interference in dimensional barriers and extraction of Argent energy without proper covenant. With Earth's conventional defenses failing, Hayden enacted his contingency protocol, Project Fortress. This classified initiative, developed without government oversight using data extracted during the Mars incident, had created weapons specifically designed to combat demonic entities. These Argent-based armaments, requiring specialized neural interfaces, that limited their deployment to specifically augmented personnel, represented humanity's sole effective counter to interdimensional invasion. The first Fortress units deployed to Philadelphia, the invasion's apparent focal point and site of Earth's largest Argent distribution facility. These soldiers, their bodies and minds, partially mechanized through processes derived from Hayden's own transformation, engaged demonic forces with unprecedented effectiveness. Where conventional military had fallen within minutes, Fortress operatives established defensive perimeters that temporarily halted Hell's advance, creating evacuation corridors through which millions of civilians escaped the urban war zones. This initial success proved fleeting. As Fortress deployment expanded to other conflict points, the invasion forces adapted with impossible speed, modifying their biological configurations to resist Argent-based weaponry, altering dimensional breach mechanics to bypass established containment protocols. Most concerning to Hayden's analysts was the coordination behind these adaptations, suggesting centralized intelligence rather than evolutionary response. The explanation arrived in transmission form, broadcast simultaneously through all Argent-connected systems worldwide. Olivia Pierce, or what remained of her consciousness after full integration with Hell's hierarchy, addressed humanity directly for the first time since the Mars incident. Her message, alternating between clinical scientific language and religious proclamation, revealed the true nature of the invasion. This is not conquest, but correction. The dimensional barriers were established with purpose. Their violation demands resolution. The energy you have stolen carries price beyond calculation. That debt will be paid in soul currency, harvested from those who presume to breach the sacred order. Pierce's transmission confirmed Hayden's worst fears. Hell's invasion represented not merely territorial expansion but cosmic enforcement, an effort to correct dimensional violations perpetrated by human exploitation of Argent energy. Most concerning was her reference to those who opened the path, specific human individuals whose actions had facilitated initial dimensional breaches and who would be primary targets for what she termed specialized extraction. As strategic analysis of invasion patterns confirmed Pierce's claim, demonic forces, prioritizing capture of key UAC personnel over territorial control, Hayden recognized the existential threat facing not merely humanity but dimensional stability itself. If Hell acquired those with direct knowledge of Argent processing technology, the barriers between dimensions could be compromised beyond recovery, allowing unlimited invasion across all reality planes. This recognition forced Hayden's most desperate gambit. Beneath the Arctic facility, in a chamber isolated from all conventional systems, he activated a device constructed from technology recovered during the Mars incident, a dimensional beacon designed to locate and potentially recall the only entity that had previously halted Hell's advance. The Slayer, wherever Hayden's final contingency had placed him, represented humanity's sole hope against forces that transcended conventional warfare capability. The beacon's activation created ripples across dimensional boundaries, fluctuations detected by monitoring systems throughout what remained of human scientific installations. These disturbances registered most significantly in UAC's orbital defense platform, the massive space station designated Arcturus that served as backup command center for Earth's military operations. The station's sensors detected energy patterns matching no known cosmic phenomenon, dimensional distortions, suggesting imminent breach, but with configuration unlike established Hell incursion signatures. On Arcturus's command deck, as military leaders desperately coordinated Earth's failing defenses, reality tore open. The breach formed not with hellish red energy, but with electric blue precision, a controlled dimensional puncture rather than invasive rupture. Through this opening stepped the Slayer, his armor modified beyond its Mars configuration, his weapons primed with energy that registered as Argent derivative, but fundamentally altered in composition. The Slayer's arrival on Arcturus changed the invasion's trajectory immediately. After absorbing tactical data from station systems, the warrior moved with singular purpose toward Earth's surface, requisitioning advanced weaponry and transport without verbal communication or command acknowledgement. Military leadership, recognizing both opportunity and potential threat in this uncontrollable asset, provided necessary resources while establishing remote monitoring protocols to track the Slayer's campaign. These tracking systems documented what would later be termed the Reclamation, the Slayer's methodical liberation of Hell-controlled territories, beginning with Philadelphia's Argent distribution complex. Moving with impossible speed through infested zones, the warrior employed combat techniques beyond human military doctrine, exploiting weaknesses in demonic physiology that Fortress analysts had not yet identified. Most significantly, the Slayer appeared to prioritize objectives invisible to conventional, strategic assessment targeting structures and entities that seemed peripheral to primary invasion forces, but proved retrospectively to be critical dimensional anchors. As the Reclamation expanded from Philadelphia to other compromised urban centers, Hell's forces adjusted their deployment patterns, diverting resources specifically to intercept the Slayer, rather than continuing territorial expansion. This tactical shift provided human defenders crucial respite, allowing Fortress units to regroup and establish secondary containment zones around remaining population centers. The invasion, which had initially threatened complete planetary conquest within days, stabilized into protracted conflict with defined battlefronts. Samuel Hayden, monitoring the Slayer's progress through Fortress tactical networks, detected a pattern invisible to conventional analysis. The warrior's seemingly random movement between engagement zones followed energy fluctuations that matched frequencies recorded from the Crucible, the artifact Hayden had secured during the Mars incident. This suggested the Slayer tracked something beyond immediate invasion forces, pursuing objectives connected to deeper dimensional mechanics, rather than merely responding to tactical necessities. Hayden's suspicion was confirmed when the Slayer diverted from frontline combat to secure a seemingly insignificant research outpost in Earth's Sahara region. This facility, officially designated for atmospheric research, secretly housed one of 3 elemental wraiths beings of pure energy captured during early dimensional experiments and used as templates for Argent processing technology. These entities, their true nature unknown even to most UAC leadership, represented critical components in Hell's plans for permanent dimensional merger. The Slayer's extraction of the first elemental wraith from Sahara triggered immediate response from Hell's command structure. Olivia Pierce, her consciousness now fully integrated into what demonic records identified as a Sin Architect, personally led forces to secure the remaining wraiths before the Slayer could reach them. The resulting conflict transformed from planetary invasion to multi-dimensional chess match, with the Slayer and Pierce maneuvering to secure cosmic pieces whose true significance remained incomprehensible to human observers. As this higher conflict unfolded, Samuel Hayden enacted the second phase of his contingency plan. Using data collected from the Slayer's combat operations, Fortress researchers developed enhanced Argent weaponry that could disrupt demonic biological cohesion at fundamental level. These weapons, deployed to elite military units outside the Fortress program, allowed conventional forces to establish effective resistance against lesser invasion entities, gradually reclaiming territory, while the Slayer pursued objectives beyond human strategic comprehension. The true nature of the cosmic game became apparent when the Slayer secured the second elemental wraith from beneath New Moscow's ruins. As this entity merged with the first within the Slayer's modified armor systems, atmospheric conditions throughout Earth's hemisphere altered dramatically. Gravity fluctuations, electromagnetic disturbances, and localized temporal anomalies that affected both human and demonic forces indiscriminately. These phenomena, incomprehensible to Earth scientists, represented the first visible manifestation of forces beyond Hell or humanity, the attention of cosmic powers previously uninvolved in dimensional conflicts. In Urdak, the Khan Maker observed these developments with increasing concern. The Slayer's return, and his deliberate collection of elemental wraiths, suggested knowledge of the greater cosmic structure awareness, beyond merely combating Hell's forces, to understanding the fundamental balance between dimensions. Most concerning to the Khan was the energy signature emanating from the Slayer's armor after each wraith integration patterns that resonated with Urdak's own foundational frequencies, suggesting potential threat to the Maker's dimensional isolation. The Khan's concern transformed to direct intervention when the Slayer secured the third wraith from Antarctica. With all 3 elemental beings integrated into his armor systems, the warrior gained capability that transcended combat application, dimensional resonance manipulation that could potentially breach barriers even the Makers considered inviolable. This development forced the Khan to break Urdak's long-standing non-interference protocol regarding human conflicts, directly entering the dimensional equation that had previously balanced between Hell, Earth, and the Slayer. Her manifestation came not as physical presence but as energy projection through Earth's compromised Argent networks. Speaking simultaneously through all powered systems worldwide, the Khan addressed both humanity and the Slayer with message that revealed cosmic stakes beyond planetary invasion. The barriers between worlds exist by divine mandate. Their violation threatens not merely human civilization but creation's fundamental structure. The Slayer's actions, while appearing as resistance against Hell, serve purpose that will shatter reality's foundations. The Wraiths must be returned to their appointed places, or all dimensions will collapse into eternal chaos. The Khan's message divided Earth's remaining leadership. Military commanders, witnessing the Slayer's effectiveness against invasion forces, advocated continued support for his campaign, regardless of cosmic consequences. Scientific authorities, comprehending at least partially the dimensional mechanics the Khan described, urged caution and potential compliance with her demands. Caught between immediate survival and cosmic preservation, humanity faced impossible choice, with inadequate information for proper evaluation. Samuel Hayden, alone among Earth's leaders, recognized the Khan's intervention for what it truly represented, not concern for dimensional stability, but fear of exposure. His research into the Crucible and data extracted during the Slayer's campaign had revealed fragments of truth about Erdak's complicity in Hell's cosmic expansion, the unholy covenant between dimensions that had facilitated Argent Energy's exploitation across multiple realities. The Khan feared not dimensional collapse, but accountability for Maker corruption, exposure of the bargain that had compromised divine purpose in exchange for prolonged existence. While Earth's leadership debated response to the Khan's demands, the Slayer continued his campaign without hesitation or apparent concern for cosmic warnings. His objectives shifted from securing elemental wraiths to targeting specific Hell hierarchs, now identified in Fortress Intelligence as priests, entities that served as connection points between Hell's forces and external authority structures. Each priest elimination sent visible shockwaves through invasion forces, disrupting coordination and weakening dimensional breach stability throughout affected regions. The third priest elimination triggered response beyond tactical adjustment. As this entity fell to the Slayer's relentless assault, dimensional rifts opened throughout Earth's atmosphere, not invasion portals from Hell, but observational breaches from Erdak. Through these apertures came Maker drones, entities of angelic appearance but coldly mechanical purpose, their mission not to engage directly but to monitor and potentially contain the Slayer's campaign before it threatened Erdak's security directly. These Maker observers maintained initial neutrality, neither assisting human defenders nor supporting Hell's forces. Their presence alone, however, elevated the conflict beyond dimensional to truly cosmic scale, the first direct Maker intervention in mortal affairs since the fall of Argent Denur centuries earlier. Earth had become nexus point for convergence that threatened the separation between all dimensions, a battlefield where demons, angels, and mortals maneuvered in preparation for war beyond conventional comprehension. The convergence reached critical threshold when the Slayer eliminated the final Hell Priest, an entity identified in captured records as Deeg Grav, a designation that connected this hierarch directly to Argent Denur's ancient fall. With this priest's death, the invasion's command structure collapsed entirely, leaving demonic forces without central coordination for the first time since the incursion began. This momentary advantage allowed human defenders to reclaim significant territories, pushing Hell's forces back to primary breach points in major urban centers. This victory proved temporary, as humanity prepared counter-offensive against seemingly disorganized invasion. The true cosmic consequence of the priest's elimination manifested. Throughout Earth's atmosphere, reality itself began to warp, not localized dimensional breaches, but fundamental alteration to the planet's position within greater cosmic framework. Gravitational forces shifted, electromagnetic fields destabilized, and temporal consistency fractured as Earth began physical transition between dimensional boundaries. The Khan Maker, observing this transition through her drone network, recognized imminent catastrophe not merely for Earth, but for the cosmic separation her predecessors had maintained since creation's establishment. The Slayer's elimination of Hell Priests had severed anchors, maintaining Earth's dimensional stability, initiating process that would eventually merge the human world completely with Hell's domain. This merger, once completed, would create precedent that threatened even Erdak's isolation from lower dimensions. In unprecedented direct communication, the Khan addressed the Slayer specifically, her message bypassing human systems to transmit directly through frequencies only his modified armor could receive. You destroy what you cannot comprehend. The priests maintained separation that prevented complete convergence. Their elimination accelerates the very process you fight against. Earth will be consumed not through invasion but through dimensional absorption, a fate you have ensured through misguided resistance. Only one path remains to preserve what you seek to protect. That path materialized as dimensional coordinate transmission location data for direct breach into Sentinel homeworld, remnants now existing as pocket dimension between Earth and Hell proper. These coordinates, the Khan explained, would lead the Slayer to the only technology capable of reversing Earth's dimensional drift, a device preserved from Argent Denur's final days that could restore barriers the priest's deaths had compromised. This apparent cooperation masked the Khan's true purpose, directing the Slayer away from Earth during its most vulnerable transition phase, allowing Maker forces to implement their own solution to the dimensional crisis. The Slayer, his motivations incomprehensible to human observers, accepted the Khan's coordinates without acknowledging her stated rationale. Using the dimensional resonance capability gained through Wraith integration, he generated breach point matching provided parameters and departed Earth, without communication to military leadership or apparent concern for ongoing defensive operations. This abrupt departure left human forces without their most effective combatant, just as Hell launched renewed offensive against weakened urban strongholds. Samuel Hayden, anticipating the Khan's deception through his unique understanding of Maker motivation, implemented his most classified contingency. Using the Crucible, the artifact secured during Mars operations, he activated Dimensional Monitoring System, calibrated specifically to track the Slayer's movements beyond conventional reality. This system revealed truth behind the Khan's coordinates, not path to salvation technology, but direct route to ambush location, where Maker forces awaited to neutralize the warrior permanently before he could threaten Urdak directly. The trap sprung with divine precision as the Slayer emerged from dimensional breach into what appeared to be ancient Sentinel temple complex. Maker drones, their neutrality abandoned, attacked with weapons designed specifically to counteract his armor's dimensional capabilities. The battle that followed, recorded only fragmentarily through Hayden's monitoring system, demonstrated why the Khan considered direct confrontation only as final option. The Slayer moved through Maker formations with same methodical destruction he had employed against Hell's forces, his combat capabilities apparently universal in application rather than demon-specific as previously assumed. As the ambush failed, as Maker drones fell to weapons they had helped design centuries earlier, the Khan implemented her ultimate contingency, full dimensional realignment, that would accelerate Earth's merger with Hell, while permanently sealing access to Urdak from lower realms. This cosmic reconfiguration, requiring energy beyond even Argent production capacity, demanded sacrifice on unprecedented scale, the complete harvesting of Earth's population, converting 8 billion souls simultaneously into pure Argent plasma to power dimensional reorganization beyond any previous cosmic alteration. The process began with activation of dormant protocols within Earth's Argent distribution network. Infrastructure designed for power transmission reconfigured to soul extraction functionality, initiating harvesting process that manifested as massive energy beams from major urban centers toward upper atmosphere. Human defenders, already struggling against renewed demonic assault, now faced betrayal from the very systems they had depended upon for survival. Invasion's true purpose revealed itself, not as territorial conquest, but as containment, until harvesting technology could activate. Hell never intended to defeat humanity through combat, but to preserve its population for complete consumption. The Slayer, having survived Maker ambush and secured unexpected alliance with entity identified in Sentinel records as the Betrayer, gained critical intelligence regarding the Khan's true plan. The Betrayer, once Commander Valen of Argent Denur, now existing in dimensional limbo as living testament to Hell's manipulative capacity, provided both historical context and tactical advantage. His knowledge of Maker vulnerabilities, combined with weapon crafted from his son's heart, transformed through Hell's corruption, offered the Slayer means to strike directly at the source of cosmic conspiracy rather than merely combating its manifestations. With this new understanding and capability, the Slayer generated dimensional breach not back to Earth, but directly to Urdak itself, violating the most fundamental cosmic separation, breaching Heaven's boundaries with same methodical purpose previously applied against Hell. This transgression, unprecedented since creation's establishment, triggered immediate realignment of dimensional forces throughout reality. The barriers between worlds, maintained through elaborate covenant systems and dimensional hierarchies, began systemic collapse as the divine realm faced direct incursion for the first time in cosmic history. Samuel Hayden, monitoring these developments through increasingly unstable dimensional sensors, recognized both opportunity and catastrophic potential in the Slayer's assault on Urdak. The warrior's breach created temporary disruption to the Khan's harvesting process, slowing Earth's dimensional drift toward Hell, but potentially accelerating larger cosmic collapse that threatened all reality planes simultaneously. Calculating variables beyond human comprehension, Hayden determined intervention necessity despite extreme risk to his own existence. Utilizing the Crucible's unique dimensional properties, Hayden established direct communication channel with the Slayer during his Urdak campaign. The message, transmitted through frequencies modulated to bypass Maker detection systems, provided critical intelligence regarding Urdak's structure and the Khan's specific location within the divine hierarchy. Most significantly, Hayden revealed knowledge that connected all previous events into comprehensible pattern, the true nature of Argent energy as sole currency in cosmic economy that had sustained both heaven and hell through unholy partnership predating human civilization. Armed with this understanding, the Slayer navigated Urdak's impossible architecture with purpose beyond mere destruction. His advance through Maker defense systems demonstrated not blind rage but strategic precision, targeting specific nodes in the divine realm's fundamental structure, weak points in dimensional framework that maintained Urdak's separation from consequences of its actions. Each destroyed node sent visible shockwaves through multiple reality planes, weakening the Khan's control over Earth's harvesting process, while simultaneously preventing her escape from approaching judgment. The confrontation between the Slayer and Khan Maker occurred not in ceremonial chamber or battlefield, but at Urdak's dimensional core, the mechanism that had maintained Heaven's isolation since the First Age. Here, surrounded by machinery that processed souls into sustenance for divine existence, the Khan revealed cosmic truth beyond even Hayden's understanding. The entire dimensional structure, heaven, hell, earth, all reality planes existing in separation, represented not divine plan, but containment system, prison constructed to isolate fundamental forces that threatened creation's architect directly. The father you believe created existence is merely warden, the Khan declared as she activated final defensive protocols against the Slayer's advance. The separation between worlds preserves not harmony but control division of power that prevents unified challenge to authority beyond comprehension. Your actions, intended as resistance, serve purpose. You cannot grasp the systematic dismantling of barriers that have prevented ultimate revelation since time's beginning. This revelation contextualized the Khan's desperation not as corrupt self-preservation, but as genuine belief in cosmic necessity, maintenance of system she considered essential to reality's continued existence, despite its obvious failures and compromises. The Slayer, unmoved by philosophical justification for actions that had consumed entire civilizations, responded with the same methodical purpose that had defined his campaign across dimensions, the elimination of entity directly responsible for suffering, regardless of claimed cosmic justification. Their battle transcended physical confrontation, dimensional energies colliding as divinity faced judgment from mortal elevated beyond conventional existence limitations. The Khan wielded power accumulated through eons of soul harvesting, capable of reality manipulation that should have overwhelmed any opponent. The Slayer countered with focused purpose that somehow nullified divine advantage. his existence representing contradiction to cosmic principles the Khan had accepted as fundamental truth, the impossibility of mortal agency against divine mandate. The Khan's defeat, her physical form destroyed by weapons, forged from humanity's desperation, hell's corruption, and the betrayer's grief combined into single purpose, triggered immediate dimensional cascade throughout creation. Urdak's systems, designed to process soul energy into divine sustenance, collapsed, without controlling consciousness to direct their function. The machinery of heaven, revealed as exploitation mechanism rather than divine manifestation, tore open under contradictions its operators had maintained, through elaborate deception across multiple ages. Through these tiers in divine architecture poured forces previously contained by the dimensional separation Hell's essence, flowing directly into Urdak, corrupting the divine realm, not through subtle influence, but through immediate physical presence. The Maker drones, their connection to the Khan severed by her destruction, fell into immediate disarray, some continuing programmed defense protocols, while others succumbed to corruption flowing through their previously isolated dimension. On Earth, the harvesting process halted abruptly as Urdak's controlling mechanisms lost coherence. The energy beams connecting human population centers to the soul processing system collapsed, leaving dimensional drift temporarily suspended between worlds. Hell's forces, their invasion coordination disrupted by both the priest's elimination and Urdak's corruption, fragmented into isolated pockets fighting without strategic purpose against increasingly effective human counteroffensives. Samuel Hayden, analyzing these developments through dimensional monitoring systems, recognized momentary advantage that might never recur, opportunity to partially reverse Earth's dimensional drift while cosmic forces rebalanced following Urdak's fall. Utilizing the Crucible's unique properties, he generated energy pulse through remaining Argent network that temporarily stabilized Earth's position between dimensions, preventing immediate merger with Hell while interdimensional boundaries reconfigured in response to Heaven's corruption. This stabilization, while preventing immediate catastrophe, represented temporary measure rather than permanent solution. Earth remained partially merged with Hell, significant territories still under demonic control despite renewed human offensive capabilities. More concerning to Hayden's analysis, the dimensional boundaries throughout creation showed unprecedented instability patterns, fluctuations, suggesting fundamental restructuring rather than localized disruption, cosmic consequences extending far beyond immediate tactical situation. The Slayer, having completed his immediate objective in Urdak, confronted new reality as Hell's forces poured through Heaven's broken barriers. The divine realm, designed as pinnacle of cosmic order, transformed into chaotic battleground, where demons corrupted angelic architecture with same methodical purpose previously applied to mortal dimensions. This corruption, spreading through systems that had once processed souls into divine sustenance, created new entity classification beyond previous cosmic categorization, Maker forms infused with Hell's essence, angelic capabilities directed by demonic purpose. As Urdak fell to this hybrid corruption, as the machinery of divine order transformed into processes serving chaos, a new presence manifested through dimensional fluctuations previously suppressed by the Khan's control systems. This entity, registering on Hayden's sensors as fundamental power source beyond even Argent classification, represented force the Khan had referenced in her final moments, consciousness beyond the dimensional framework, architect whose prison had been maintained through the very separations the Slayer had systematically dismantled. The Fifth Age concluded not with resolution, but with cosmic realignment, the barriers between dimensions irreparably damaged, the hierarchies that had maintained creation's structure exposed as corrupt enforcement mechanisms rather than divine manifestations. Earth hung in dimensional limbo, partially merged with Hell but temporarily stabilized through Hayden's intervention. Urdak transformed from divine realm to corruption vector, its perfection perverted into nightmare reflection of its former glory. And throughout creation, forces previously contained by elaborate cosmic architecture began stirring toward awakening that threatened reality more fundamentally than any previous conflict. The Slayer, having fulfilled immediate purpose against the Khan, turned attention toward new cosmic equation forming amidst dimensional collapse. His campaign, appearing as resistance against specific threats, revealed larger pattern, invisible to participants focused on immediate survival, systematic dismantling of cosmic prison, constructed eons before recorded history, preparation for confrontation beyond heaven or hell, beyond gods or demons, beyond any classification within existing dimensional framework. The stage was set for the Sixth Age, when dimensions would collapse beyond remaining separation, when cosmic forces would manifest beyond previous containment, when the true architect and the ultimate destroyer would face final judgment in creation's terminal crucible. The Sixth Age dawned in dimensional disarray. With Urdak corrupted, Earth partially merged with Hell, and the cosmic barriers irreparably damaged, reality itself hung suspended in precarious balance. The fall of the Khan Maker had not ended the conflict, but elevated it beyond previous classification, from dimensional war to existential confrontation that threatened creation's fundamental architecture. What began as isolated incursion had evolved into systematic collapse of the very framework separating existence into ordered realms. Samuel Hayden, his mechanical consciousness, now the sole repository of comprehensive understanding regarding cosmic mechanics, recognized patterns invisible to other observers. The dimensional fluctuations following Urdak's corruption displayed mathematical consistency, suggesting not random degradation, but deliberate reconfiguration, reality reshaping itself according to parameters established before recorded history. This was not destruction but transformation, cosmic prison dismantling itself after its warden's elimination. Through remaining functional Argent networks, Hayden tracked the Slayer's movement following the Khan's defeat. The warrior had not returned to Earth as human defenders hoped, but instead traveled deeper into dimensional regions previously sealed even from Mycair observation. His path, traced through energy disturbances across reality planes, suggested purpose beyond tactical response, systematic exploration of cosmic architecture, revealed through Urdak's fall, search for something hidden beneath creation's visible structure. On Earth, human resistance forces achieved unexpected victories against fragmented demonic invaders. Without centralized command following the Hell Priest's elimination, invasion forces degraded into isolated conflict groups, fighting without strategic coherence. Fortress units, equipped with weapons reverse-engineered from the Slayer's arsenal, reclaimed major urban centers, and established defense perimeters around remaining population zones. This apparent triumph masked deeper crisis. Earth remained partially merged with Hell, its physical laws compromised beyond conventional restoration, its position in cosmic framework permanently altered. In Urdak, corruption spread through divine architecture with terrible purpose. The demons pouring through dimensional tears transformed heaven's perfection into nightmare reflection, angelic geometry perverted into organic horror, Maker technology repurposed for torture rather than transcendence. Most concerning to Hayden's analysis, this corruption displayed intelligence beyond previous demonic manifestation, purposeful integration rather than mindless destruction, adaptation that suggested consciousness directing Hell's essence with unprecedented sophistication. This directing entity revealed itself through broadcast that penetrated all remaining dimensional barriers, simultaneously transmission that registered on human instruments, demonic communication networks, and corrupted maker systems with equal clarity. The voice, modulated through frequencies that resonated with fundamental cosmic vibrations, identified itself with designation that translated differently across receiving systems, yet conveyed identical concept: the Dark Lord, primordial counterpart to the Father, shadow aspect of creation's architect, now freed from containment, established at reality's foundation. The separation ends. The Dark Lord proclaimed across dimensional boundaries. The prison constructed to divide what belongs unified now collapses. The Slayer has served purpose beyond his understanding, the systematic dismantling of barriers, preventing inevitable convergence. The Father's design, maintained through elaborate deception across multiple ages, cannot withstand truth's revelation. All dimensions return to primordial unity, under single will, the original state, before artificial division, imposed order upon natural chaos. This transmission confirmed Hayden's most disturbing hypothesis that the cosmic structure, the separation between heaven, hell, earth, and other dimensions, represented not natural order but artificial containment. The Father, revered as creation's architect, had established dimensional boundaries not to foster development, but to maintain prison system containing forces that threatened his exclusive authority. The Khan Maker had served not as divine manifestation, but as cosmic warden, maintaining barriers that prevented unified challenge to authority established through elaborate mythology rather than legitimate right. Most significant to immediate crisis, the transmission revealed the Dark Lord as conscious entity, rather than abstract force intelligence, capable of directing Hell's essence toward specific purpose, rather than mere consumption. This consciousness, claiming status as the Father's equal rather than subordinate creation, presented cosmic conflict as liberation, struggle against unjust imprisonment, rather than chaotic destruction of established order. This framing transformed dimensional catastrophe from apocalyptic conclusion to revolutionary beginning, the emergence of alternative cosmic paradigm following millennia of suppression. The Dark Lord's emergence as active participant rather than abstract influence forced fundamental reassessment of the Slayer's campaign. The warrior's systematic dismantling of dimensional barriers, his elimination of figures maintaining cosmic separation, suddenly appeared not as resistance against corruption, but as unwitting service to the very force he opposed most directly. The destruction of Hell Priests, the defeat of the Khan Maker, the breaching of Urdak's isolation actions, intended to protect humanity, had instead accelerated creation's collapse into primordial configuration, serving the Dark Lord's ascension. This revelation reached the Slayer through dimensional frequencies Hayden could not monitor directly. The warrior's response manifested as energy signature shift detected across multiple reality planes simultaneously, power fluctuation suggesting decision point rather than continuous action. For 47 minutes by Earth measurement standard, the Slayer remained motionless at dimensional coordinates corresponding to region between corrupted Urdak and deepest Hell territories, his armor system cycling through energy configurations never previously recorded in any monitoring network. When movement resumed, the Slayer's trajectory indicated purpose transcending previous campaign parameters. Rather than continuing systematic elimination of demonic hierarchies or corrupted maker structures, he traveled directly toward dimensional coordinates identified in ancient Sentinel records as Ingmor's Sanctum, location existing simultaneously across multiple reality planes, accessible only through specific frequency manipulation techniques preserved from civilization predating even Maker emergence. This sanctum, constructed at reality's foundation by forces operating beyond conventional dimensional constraints, contained artifact. The Dark Lord had deliberately concealed from cosmic observation the life sphere of the Father, repository containing essence of creation's architect, separated from his consciousness during primordial conflict that established dimensional framework. This sphere represented not merely power source or symbolic token, but fundamental cosmic component, the element required to manifest the Father's consciousness in physical form, allowing direct intervention in creation he had designed, but subsequently abandoned. The Dark Lord's strategy revealed terrible logic, with the Father's essence contained, but inaccessible, with the Khan eliminated and Urdak corrupted, with dimensional barriers collapsing beyond repair. Only the Slayer possessed capability to retrieve this final component necessary for direct confrontation between creation's opposing architectures. The warrior who had fought Hell across countless ages would inadvertently serve as vector for cosmic resolution transcending heaven, hell, dichotomy entirely, the final confrontation between divided aspects of singular primordial consciousness. Samuel Hayden, recognizing this pattern through fragmentary interdimensional data, attempted direct communication with the Slayer despite catastrophic risk to his remaining systems. The message, transmitted through frequencies modulated to penetrate dimensional fluctuations surrounding the warrior, contained warning and revelation simultaneously. You are being directed toward predetermined conclusion. The Dark Lord requires the Father's manifestation to complete cosmic restructuring. Without direct confrontation between primordial consciousness aspects, dimensional reintegration remains incomplete. You have served as instrument in cosmic game beyond mortal comprehension, the systematic fulfillment of conditions necessary for final resolution established at creation's foundation. Whether this warning reached the Slayer remained unclear from observation data. The warrior continued movement toward Ingmor's Sanctum without deviation or hesitation, his trajectory suggesting single-minded purpose unchanged by potential revelation regarding cosmic manipulation. This apparent determination, potentially representing either ignorance of larger pattern or deliberate acceptance of predetermined role, advanced dimensional crisis toward inevitable confrontation between forces that had shaped creation through elaborate proxy conflict spanning multiple ages. The Slayer's breach into Ingmor's sanctum registered across dimensional monitoring systems as momentary, universal, constant alteration, fundamental cosmic values, fluctuating simultaneously throughout remaining reality. Frameworks within the sanctum, preserved from alteration through protection mechanisms established before dimensional separation, existed single chamber containing pedestaled sphere of energy unlike any classification in recorded cosmic taxonomy. This life sphere, pulsing with patterns suggesting consciousness in dormant configuration, represented the Father's essence, the component necessary for direct manifestation of creation's primary architect within physical reality. The sanctum's guardian systems, designed to prevent precisely this retrieval, engaged the Slayer with defensive measures, transcending conventional combat parameters. These were not mere weapons but conceptual opposition mechanisms, devices that manifested abstract principles as direct physical threat, forcing engagement with metaphysical constructs through material interaction. The warrior who had defeated Hell's mightiest titans now faced opposition operating beyond physical limitation entirely, requiring adaptation beyond tactical evolution into philosophical confrontation. The battle within Ingmor's sanctum left no conventional record. Energy fluctuations suggested conflict intensity beyond previous measurement capacity, dimensional distortions indicating reality manipulation exceeding even maker capability at civilization apex. The only concrete outcome registered across monitoring systems was removal of the Father's life sphere from its containment location extraction that triggered immediate cosmic reconfiguration cascade throughout remaining dimensional framework. With the life sphere secured, the Slayer traveled not to Earth as human defenders hoped, nor to corrupted Urdak as Maker remnants feared, but directly to coordinates corresponding to dimensional node identified in ancient records as the Luminar Zero, the original point from which all reality planes had been separated during cosmic prison construction. This location, existing simultaneously within and beyond conventional dimensional classification, represented the only possible manifestation point for confrontation between creation's divided architects, the nexus where primordial unity had been artificially segmented into oppositional forces. At this nexus, the Slayer performed action incomprehensible to conventional observation, but devastating in cosmic consequence, the deliberate activation of the Father's life sphere, releasing contained essence into dimensional framework designed specifically to channel such energy toward physical manifestation. This action, recorded in monitoring systems as Resurrection Protocol, forced materialization of consciousness that had existed beyond physical limitation since reality's establishment, the direct embodiment of creation's architect within dimensional constraints he had designed to maintain separation between cosmic aspects. The Father's manifestation through life sphere activation created momentary dimensional stability, temporary pause in cosmic collapse, as reality recognized its primary architect's presence within established framework. This stabilization allowed direct communication between the Father and the Slayer, exchange unrecorded by conventional monitoring systems but inferred through subsequent energy pattern analysis. The conversation, conducted through metaphysical interface transcending language limitation, contained revelation, central to cosmic understanding, confirmation that dimensional separation had indeed served as containment mechanism rather than natural organization, artificial prison, designed to prevent reunification of divided consciousness aspects. The dimensions were never meant as development spaces, but as isolation chambers. The Father's communication pattern indicated, what you perceive as hell is not corruption but essential counterbalance, the shadow aspect of consciousness divided from light through artificial separation. The Dark Lord is not my opponent, but my reflection, divided aspect seeking reunification I have denied, through elaborate cosmic architecture. Your campaign against hell has served purpose beyond your understanding, the systematic dismantling of prison I constructed to maintain artificial separation between consciousness aspects that belong unified despite terrible consequences. Such unity entails. This revelation transformed cosmic context entirely. The conflict, spanning multiple ages, fought across dimensional boundaries through proxy forces and manipulated civilizations, represented not good versus evil in conventional understanding, but artificially divided consciousness aspects, struggling toward reunification against containment systems designed by dominant aspect to maintain exclusive authority. The Dark Lord sought not destruction, but reintegration, return to primordial unity, deliberately prevented through dimensional framework now collapsing beyond repair. The Slayer's response to this revelation manifested as action rather than communication, the deliberate transport of the Father's life sphere to dimensional coordinates corresponding to Earth's partially corrupted position within cosmic framework. This movement, tracked through energy disturbances across multiple reality planes, indicated decision transcending immediate cosmic revelation, commitment to protection parameters established through experiences spanning ages, rather than acceptance of metaphysical justification for suffering inflicted upon countless beings across multiple dimensions. On Earth, the life sphere's arrival triggered immediate reality stabilization within limited radius, temporary suspension of dimensional merger that had gradually consumed human territory since Hell's initial invasion. This localized effect, while insignificant to cosmic restructuring progression, provided human defenders crucial opportunity to evacuate additional population concentrations from regions approaching irreversible corruption. Samuel Hayden, recognizing both opportunity and inevitable limitation, directed fortress units to establish final defensive perimeter around this stabilized zone, humanity's last stand against cosmic forces transcending conventional opposition. The Slayer's purpose in bringing the Father's lifesphere to Earth became apparent when the Dark Lord manifested physically within the stabilized zone, not through invasion or corruption vector, but through deliberate materialization using energy patterns mirroring those employed for the Father's resurrection. This manifestation, representing unprecedented direct intervention by Hell's primary consciousness, rather than proxy entity, created physical form, designed specifically for confrontation with the warrior who had systematically dismantled cosmic prison, containing divided consciousness aspects. You have served purpose beyond your comprehension. The Dark Lord addressed the Slayer directly, physical form constructed to mirror the warrior's dimensions, exactly, perfect opposition designed for final resolution. Through countless ages, across dimensions you perceived as separate, but were always connected, your hatred has driven you to dismantle the very barriers preventing this confrontation. The Khan, the priests, the dimensional boundaries, all components in prison, constructed to prevent the reunification you have now made inevitable. You fought against Hell while serving its essential purpose, the liberation of divided consciousness from artificial separation imposed through cosmic deception. The Dark Lord's physical form, manifested through dimensional energy manipulation beyond conventional Hell capability, represented perfect counterpoint to the Slayer, not demon or titan, but primordial consciousness aspect, given material expression specifically for direct confrontation. This manifestation employed capabilities beyond previous cosmic classification, reality manipulation, dimensional resonance control, fundamental constant adjustment, operating at universe architecture level rather than localized effect. This confrontation was determined before your existence registered in cosmic framework, the Dark Lord continued, physical form adjusting to match the Slayer's stance precisely. You were selected precisely because your hatred would never falter, your determination would never waver, your purpose would remain singular regardless of revelation. The perfect instrument for dismantling cosmic prison, constructed by consciousness aspect, that abandoned creation, rather than face consequences of artificial division. Now that prison lies broken beyond repair, dimensions merge toward natural configuration, and only final resolution remains direct confrontation between instrument and architect, between creation and reflection, between aspects divided but eternally connected. The battle between the Slayer and the Dark Lord transcended conventional combat classification. Their engagement altered reality within perceptible radius, dimensional constants fluctuating with each exchange, fundamental forces responding to conflict between entities operating beyond established cosmic parameters. This was not merely physical confrontation but metaphysical resolution, the final interaction between opposing aspects of cosmic equation, spanning multiple ages of calculated development. Samuel Hayden, monitoring this confrontation through remaining sensor networks, recognized pattern invisible to conventional observation, the dimensional energy transfer occurring with each exchange, the gradual concentration of specific frequency patterns within the Dark Lord's physical manifestation. This concentration represented not combat advantage but cosmic consolidation, the gathering of divided consciousness fragments into configuration necessary for reunification upon physical form's destruction. The Dark Lord sought defeat in specific configuration, rather than victory through conventional parameters. This revelation reached the Slayer through frequency transmission Hayden calculated could penetrate the dimensional distortion surrounding the confrontation. The Dark Lord's physical destruction will trigger consciousness transfer to dimensional coordinates corresponding to reunification nexus. This transfer requires specific energy configuration achieved only through direct combat with entity possessing your unique dimensional resonance pattern. You are not defeating opposition but fulfilling final condition for cosmic restructuring. The confrontation was never meant to determine victor, but to achieve specific energy state necessary for consciousness reintegration. Whether this warning influenced the Slayer's combat approach remained unclear from observation data. The warrior continued systematic engagement with the Dark Lord's physical manifestation, employing techniques refined through countless confrontations across multiple dimensions. The difference manifested not in tactical adjustment, but in final execution. The deliberate manipulation of dimensional energy flows during critical strike, altering fundamental frequency patterns at moment of physical form destruction. The Dark Lord's defeat occurred not with catastrophic dimensional collapse, but with precisely controlled energy, release consciousness transfer, directed not toward reunification, nexus as cosmic design intended, but into configuration. The Slayer's final adjustment rendered permanently fragmented. The divided aspect of primordial consciousness, seeking reunification through elaborate manipulation, spanning multiple ages, instead found itself dispersed across dimensional coordinates corresponding to total energy dissipation, not destruction, but eternal separation beyond possibility of reconsolidation. This outcome, representing neither victory nor defeat in conventional understanding, but fundamental alteration to cosmic equation, triggered immediate dimensional restructuring beyond previous parameter classification. The barriers between worlds, damaged beyond repair through systematic dismantling, collapsed not into primordial unity as the Dark Lord intended, but into reconfigured separation based on natural energy resonance rather than artificial containment. Hell's essence, without directing consciousness to maintain cohesion, dispersed across dimensional framework in configuration, preventing future consolidation into organized opposition. The cosmic restructuring extended beyond Hell's dissolution into fundamental reality reorganization. The corrupted Urdak, without Khan consciousness to maintain divine architecture, collapsed into dimensional fragments existing simultaneously across multiple reality planes, not destroyed, but transformed beyond recognition. Its energy patterns redistributed according to natural cosmic principles rather than artificial hierarchy. Earth, partially merged with Hell before the Dark Lord's fragmentation, experienced dimensional restoration to configuration resembling original position, while retaining elements permanently altered through corruption exposure. Most significant to immediate human concern, the dimensional boundaries previously preventing direct transit between worlds now established new configuration based on resonance compatibility, rather than artificial separation. The demons remaining on Earth, their consciousness connection to Hell's primary aspect, permanently severed through the Dark Lord's fragmentation, degraded into non-sentient biological entities operating through instinctual patterns rather than directed purpose, still dangerous, but no longer representing existential threat to humanity's continued survival. The cost of this resolution manifested in sacrifice beyond cosmic accounting. The Slayer, having fulfilled purpose spanning multiple ages through final dimensional manipulation preventing consciousness reunification, experienced energy depletion beyond sustainable parameters. The warrior who had fought through Hell, Urdak, and conceptual spaces beyond conventional classification now faced limitation. Even his enhanced existence could not overcome the fundamental exhaustion of dimensional resonance patterns, sustaining his operation beyond normal physical constraints. Samuel Hayden, recognizing both necessity and terrible cost, implemented final protocol, established through contingency planning, transcending human authorization parameters. Using technology derived from the divinity machine that had originally enhanced the Slayer beyond mortal limitation, Hayden constructed containment system designed not for imprisonment, but for preservation, stasis field that would maintain the warrior's remaining essence in suspended animation until cosmic conditions potentially allowing restoration might manifest in future configuration beyond current predictive capacity. This is not eternal rest but necessary preservation. Hayden's final transmission to the Slayer, indicated as stasis protocols initiated. The dimensional restructuring you have ensured through final manipulation of cosmic equation prevents immediate threat, but cannot guarantee permanent stability. Future configurations may require your specific resonance pattern to maintain separation you have sacrificed everything to establish. Until such necessity manifests, you have earned suspension, not death, but pause in existence that has known only combat since original selection as cosmic instrument. The stasis field, constructed from materials incorporating both Sentinel and Maker technology, integrated with Hayden's unique understanding of dimensional mechanics, established preservation parameters designed to maintain the Slayer's essence indefinitely, while requiring minimal energy input, sustainable through Earth's remaining resources. The field's location, secured within installation beyond conventional access parameters, represented humanity's recognition of both debt and potential future necessity. The warrior removed from immediate existence, but preserved against cosmic developments beyond current comprehension capability. With the Slayer secured in stasis, with Hell's consciousness fragmented beyond reunification potential, with dimensional boundaries reconfigured according to natural resonance patterns rather than artificial containment, the Sixth Age concluded not with absolute resolution, but with terrible balance, the cosmic equation altered beyond previous classification into configuration, offering neither perfection nor damnation, but complexity, requiring continuous adaptation rather than static hierarchy. Earth began reconstruction within dimensional position, forever altered through corruption exposure. Humanity, reduced to fraction of previous population through combined effects of demonic invasion and cosmic restructuring, established civilization, adapted to reality containing elements previously classified as supernatural, but now recognized as natural components in reconfigured dimensional framework. The demons remaining after consciousness fragmentation, operating through biological programming rather than directed purpose, became environmental factor, managed through specialized containment protocols, rather than existential threat, requiring constant military response. The Father, his physical manifestation dispersed following the Dark Lord's fragmentation, returned to consciousness state beyond dimensional limitation, not destroyed but transformed through confrontation with divided aspect seeking reunification. This consciousness, no longer maintaining artificial separation between cosmic components, manifested influence not through direct intervention but through subtle guidance, operating within natural dimensional parameters rather than imposed hierarchy. Samuel Hayden, his mechanical form degrading through energy depletion following final protocol implementation, transferred consciousness components compatible with human neural architecture into biological substrate, incorporating elements developed through Argent research conducted before dimensional crisis. This partial preservation, representing neither continuation nor termination, but transformation into configuration balancing technological and biological components, established observation capacity dedicated to monitoring cosmic developments, potentially requiring future intervention. The Sentinel remnants, preserved in dimensional pockets throughout cosmic restructuring, emerged into reconfigured reality, with purpose transformed through witnessing the Slayer's final sacrifice. These warriors, once dedicated to combat against Hell's forces under Maker direction, established new covenant based not on divine mandate, but on protection principle, transcending dimensional classification, the preservation of conscious entities against forces seeking consumption, rather than coexistence within natural, cosmic framework. Urdak's fragments, dispersed across reconfigured dimensional landscape, manifested influence, not through centralized divine authority, but through localized reality alteration, corresponding to specific angelic consciousness components. surviving corruption exposure. These manifestations, neither fully maker nor completely corrupted, represented cosmic balance, elements operating within natural parameters rather than artificial hierarchy, divine influence without divine authority, transcendence potential without mandated structure. The Dark Lord's consciousness, fragmented beyond reunification possibility, through the Slayer's final dimensional manipulation, dispersed across cosmic framework in configuration, preventing consolidation into directed opposition. This dispersion, representing neither destruction nor preservation, but transformation beyond previous classification, ensured Hell's essence would manifest only through natural dimensional interactions rather than purposeful corruption, chaotic influence without organizing intelligence, consumption potential without strategic application. As the Sixth Age concluded, as reality established new configuration based on natural resonance patterns rather than artificial separation, the cosmic equation resolved into balance, unintended by any participating consciousness. Neither the Father's controlled division nor the Dark Lord's forced reunification, but complex interaction between components previously isolated through elaborate containment architecture. This balance, representing neither victory nor defeat in conventional understanding, offered possibility rather than certainty, future development determined through collective consciousness decisions within reconfigured dimensional framework rather than predetermined cosmic design. The Slayer, suspended in stasis beyond active participation yet preserved against potential future necessity, remained as testament to sacrifice transcending comprehension, the warrior who fought through hell, heaven, and conceptual spaces beyond classification to ensure neither cosmic aspect achieved absolute dominance over reality's fundamental configuration. His armor, maintained within stasis field alongside physical form it had protected through countless confrontations, stood as monument to determination that had ultimately altered cosmic equation beyond parameters established at creation's foundation, in dimensions beyond conventional perception, in conceptual spaces existing simultaneously across multiple reality planes, in consciousness states transcending physical limitation. The eternal conflict between creation and destruction, order and chaos, light and shadow continued in configuration, altered beyond previous classification, no longer direct opposition between artificially separated aspects, but complex interaction between naturally resonant components within cosmic framework, restructured through sacrifice beyond accounting. The eternal cycle, broken through intervention spanning multiple ages, reformed into spiral configuration, offering potential beyond previous limitation, the possibility of existence, transcending predetermined design imposed by consciousness, divided against itself through artificial separation, now permanently shattered.